Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 255. That's Planet Extra Podcast. I am Chaz Licciardello, a host of Planet America on ABC Australia, and this is an official podcast of the ABC. So say hi to the Ombudsman for me. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube at the Planet PEP channel. That's right, we have renamed it. The times are changing, and you can find highlights there as well. And we're on Facebook at the Chaz from Planet America channel, although we're going to change the name of that soon in like a day or two as well. You also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs, and if you leave a comment under our current episode video, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us or blue sky us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChaz Dr. Dave. Probably going to change that name as well. If you want to chat to some fellow peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen now or in the blurb of the podcast. But if you want to contact me or Lockie the Lackey privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. The address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com, and I am replying to them now. I'm going to do so tonight. So there. And do not forget to subscribe for all that peppy goodness. It all helps. Lots of subscriptions lately, Lockie. It's great. Keep on going. And we are recording this at 4:24 p.m. on Thursday, the 9th of April. That is, 1:25 now a.m. 2:25 a.m. on the East Coast of America on Thursday morning, in case you're wondering. And once again, we're going to have this out in about 24 hours' time, so you'll know all the stuff that we have missed. But now it is time for the lady who will not raise the stakes on inconsequential views, but you're still a doctor, and that's important to me for some reason. Hello, Dr. Emma.
Hey, Chaz, how are you?
Very, very good. Dr. Emma, for those who don't know who you are, why don't you just tell us your background, tell us who you are, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I'm not a real doctor. I'm a doctor of history.
That's a real doctor.
Oh, sure. Okay.
You're more of a doctor than Doctor Who. Keep on going.
I guess so. Can't try. I'm terrible, though. I am currently the Director of International and Security Affairs at the Australia Institute, which is an independent think tank. And I'm really lucky I don't have to do the Dr. Dave disclosure. Nothing I say here I wouldn't say in an Australia Institute staff meeting. So.
Fair enough. I should also say your last name, which is Shortis. I'm not going to talk to you like you're a sex therapist, just Dr. Ruth. No last names.
I don't mind Dr. Emma.
That's right. What are you grateful for, Dr. Emma?
I am really grateful this week, Chaz, for group hugs in space.
Ah, yes.
So we'll talk. I think we'll talk a little bit about Artemis later. But I was watching telly the other morning and seeing the 4 crew members on the Orion spacecraft get around to the far side of the moon, break the distance record set by Apollo 13 in 1970, and then decide to name a bright spot on the moon after the wife of one of the crew members who had passed away. They called this little bright spot on the moon Carol, and they all cried and they did a big group hug, and I was sitting watching the TV also bawling my eyes out, and fellow watchers on social media were all crying together. Somebody tweeted or posted that he'd loved his wife to the moon and back, and it was so wholesome and so beautiful, and I'm holding on to it.
There's a lot of positive emotions associated with moon trips, because you get all these photos of seeing the tiny little speck of the Earth and you go, isn't it beautiful? And aren't our petty squabbles on the Earth so pointless? And we're all the same, and what are we doing? And I do try, generally speaking, to try and think. I always refer to 30,000 feet perspective, thinking about what the aliens would think if they were looking at some particular squabble or one particular argument, or what the people in 500 years will think when they look back in history and they say, oh, they were arguing about that tweet. That's how I try to keep perspective. People often ask how I don't go crazy.
That's a good way.
That's how I don't go crazy. I try and think as much as I can about either 500 years' time or the aliens. Yeah. And I think these moon trips make all of us think about the aliens. Not that there are or not, but just the alien perspective of looking at the speck of the Earth. And I can say...
Oh, no, I think about the aliens. I make a point of being on the record about the aliens on the reg so that when they do come, I can be one of the people on the ABC TV panel talking about what it all means.
And who aren't killed.
Just to be fully transparent.
You can welcome our alien overlords, so to speak.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yes.
Hey, Jess, what are you grateful for?
Thank you for asking. Look, this is going to be an interesting one. I reckon there'll be some people who don't like this one, but I actually am genuinely grateful for this. This is something, I'm not saying there are things which sometimes I just do smart assery in my grateful, but this one I was actually thinking about, and I was thinking, this is the dog that hasn't barked. And sometimes we just take them for granted. And I don't want to take this one for granted. Whereas when we were watching the situation in Iran, there's basically been two ways that Iran has been going. It's been going from one undesirable situation to another undesirable situation that's different. Either it's undesirable because everyone's going to die, or it's undesirable because Iran are going to do whatever the hell they want. Like neither of them are desirable. And we've been flicking from one to the other. And as that's been happening, you just think to yourself, is there any possibility of anything positive in the long term coming out of this Iran situation? I'm not sure there is, but there is a dog that hasn't been barking this whole time, and that's Venezuela. If I told you 6 months ago that Trump was going to roll into Venezuela, kidnap the leader, declare himself as running the country, kind of, saying he was doing it largely so he could take the oil, and then ask you how that was going to work out, I imagine that you would have thought, I certainly did, that 3 months down the track, it would have been chaos. It would have been an absolute clusterfuck. But if we look at what's happened in Venezuela in the last 3 months, I'm not saying it's great. It's pretty far from great. But there is a gradual evolution occurring in Venezuela from the governance in Venezuela being the absolute rock bottom imaginable to one level above the absolute rock bottom imaginable. In that there have been positive things happening. There have been prisoners released. There have been reforms. Not big ones. I definitely do not want to suggest that it's a great situation in Venezuela. What I'm suggesting is, if I told you 6 months ago that you would have the situation now, after what happened in January, you have said that's probably the best you can possibly expect. And it could get a lot worse, like a lot worse. And there's no civil war, there's no anarchy, there's no retribution going on. It could be so much worse. And at this point in time, they are continuing to try and just push bit by bit for reforms. And if it continues on like this, I would say that's the best you could ever expect a mini coup, which is what happened, to end up with. And that's in no way me justifying what Trump did. That's just me recognizing the reality that we are taking for granted. But it is happening. The fact we're not talking about it, I think, is a good sign. And there was a poll out the other day. The thing that made me think about this was there was an Atlas Intel poll of Venezuelans. 80% of Venezuelans think their country is the same or better off now than under Maduro. 54% said that greater US influence is a positive thing. 52% said that the country's civil liberties have increased. Now, look, that's not 100% of people saying everything, happy days are here again. I'm not pretending it is. But what I'm saying, at the end of the day, if people are relatively okay with the disgraceful situation that occurred 2 months ago, the results of it, because think about it. The Venezuelans, that I imagine they would have been predisposed to go, you know what? Someone comes in and takes over our country, we're pretty unhappy. The fact that you're not getting those kinds of results in the poll suggests that things can't be going that badly. And at the end of the day, if it's okay for the Venezuelans, it should be okay for us, because they're the ones who got their skin in the game. So I am grateful that Venezuela is where it's at to date, given where it was 2 months ago. And I'm hopeful that it continues to evolve somewhat. And I hope I can come back to this in 6 months' time and say I'm still grateful for where it's at. That will not, in hindsight, justify what Trump did, if that does happen. But let's be grateful for small mercies, I would suggest. Is that insane?
No, I think that's fair. Being grateful that things aren't worse is a nice place to be.
I know that's a low bar. The sheriff of the low bar is back.
It is.
Yeehaw! Why don't you play a quack to celebrate, Lucky? Thank you. So, anyway, before we get into the major content, I just got a couple of quick correspondences. There's no correspondence extra this week because we had 2 podcasts, but I am probably going to do more correspondence during Chaz Unleashed at the end of this. But in the meantime, I got a couple I want to do up the top here. CC Pavel. I spoke, I think it was last week, about mortgage rates dropping below 6% just before the war and then shooting up during the war, saying there's just one more thing that's gone wrong during the war for America. CC says, mortgage rates were below 6% for like a day before going back up, before the war even started. We bought a house this year, locked in a mortgage rate just above 6% in mid-Feb as people that make well above the national and state household average with prime credit and the 20% down payment. You're correct to say that they have continued to bump, but it wasn't great beforehand either. Fair point, CC. You got the local knowledge. It wasn't great beforehand. I think a graph, though, would make my point most effectively. You can see here, CC's point about the rates only being below 6% for a day or two and nudging up slightly above 6% just before the war started, that's correct. But have a look at the huge jump after the war started to 6.46%. That's 6 months of gradual decreases being wiped out in 4 weeks because of the war. Pretty clear the war did not help things. So that's the point I'm going to make, while at the same time acknowledging CC's point. Flea Chop wrote about the MAGA poll that we've been talking about a few times now. We talked about it with Jared again. Flea Chop said, MAGA as a percentage of Republicans, you note that has gone from 28% to 30% and interpreted this as meaning the MAGA base is growing. While this could be true, could also reflect that many moderate or anti-Trump Republicans are abandoning the party altogether, writing it off as a lost cause. Mean that of those that are left, MAGA is a higher percentage without actually growing in raw number because the overall number of people willing to identify as Republicans is shrinking. Of course, this is my wishful thinking, but it's potentially as likely without knowing more about the data. The point you make is correct, Flea Chop, if you're describing accurately what I meant to say. I don't think I was clear enough here. Yes, and a few other people said this as well, which is why I'm bringing this up. I obviously wasn't clear enough. If the poll said MAGA has gone from 28 to 30% of Republicans, then that would raise the questions that you raise, Flea Chop. I didn't say that. Or at least I didn't mean to say that. If I said that, I was wrong. It's 28 to 30% of the poll, of all Americans. Okay, so there are more people in the MAGA base as a raw number, according to those polls. It's objectively getting bigger. It's irrelevant, the size of MAGA in comparison to Republicans for the purposes of this poll. Just the MAGA base has gone from 28% of Americans to 30% of Americans, according to the poll. Now, it's within the margin of error, so let's not get too excited. But my point is, it's not about Republicans, whether they're still on board or not on board or whatever. The MAGA base is either maintaining or growing. That is what the polls say. And another correspondence about the shutdown. I had a bit to say in PEP 253 about the Democrats giving up all their ICE reforms in order to allow ICE funding to pass without the Democrats having their fingerprints on it. I characterised that as Democrats giving up on improving ICE's practices marginally in order to look like they're fighting to their base. And I was not very complimentary about that. Now Z writes, Chaz, you're missing something critical about what the Democrats achieved by not funding ICE. In strategy, we have something called a forced error. A forced error occurs when the opponent creates a situation where there is no correct or easy move to make, forcing them into a suboptimal outcome. Sometimes in strategy, you want to force your opponent to use their trump card on something they don't want to. In this case, it's reconciliation. While they have that up their sleeve, they have power to win any tactical exchange they want. But once it's gone, that's it. They can't do it again. So in this case, the Democrats may lose at a tactical level, but this is a strategic win because next time a budget battle comes up, the Republicans won't be able to use this solution to win the next fight, and the Democrats can push harder. That's an extremely clever point from Zay, I must say. Too clever for me. I didn't see that. He's right. It's absolutely correct. You get one reconciliation bill per year. If the Republicans waste it on funding ICE, they can't use it for anything else. For those who go, but how about after the fiscal year's over in October, the 1st of October, they've got another one. Yes, but the midterms are coming very quickly then. It takes a while to do reconciliation. They're not going to have the time to do anything else in reconciliation between the 1st of October and the midterms. And then obviously you got a new Congress. So really they've just got one shot. Zay's right. And if they use that one shot on funding ICE, that's it. It's gone. Nothing else they can do for the rest of the year. So they need to use it wisely. And by the way, on that note, we're seeing a lot of Republicans at the moment talk about potentially funding the military, funding the defense budget through reconciliation as well. They're going to have to choose. They're going to do one or the other. Or if they do it together, they better do it fast because there's a shutdown at the moment. But they only get one shot per year. I'll say Schumer is a smart guy as well. Like, it's not like that wouldn't have occurred to him, even if it didn't occur to me. Here's a good example of Schumer being clever. When Trump was rattling on about NATO last week, Schumer tweets out this: "I can promise this, the Senate will not vote to leave NATO and abandon our allies just because Trump is upset they wouldn't go along with his reckless war of choice. Thank you to Secretary Rubio for sponsoring the bill in 2023, requiring a 2/3 vote of the Senate to make sure clueless presidents couldn't act on a whim." And then he attached Rubio's announcement of that bill back in 2023. It's deft. He's good at that kind of stuff. Also, an update on the shutdown generally, which is why he's going to put this up the top so I could give you the update. I mentioned that while Trump, the House and the Senate had all signed on to the John Thune strategy of passing all DHS funding except for ICE and Border Patrol through normal processes, and then passing ICE funding and Border Patrol with 50 votes using reconciliation. I mentioned the House still hadn't taken their vote. And that, to me, at the time, I said that suggests Mike Johnson doesn't have the numbers. Turns out he does not have the numbers. The House Freedom Caucus put out a statement yesterday that read, "We cannot leave ICE and CBP hanging with nothing but hopes and prayers that Reconciliation 2.0 comes together. That's why we must use reconciliation to fully fund all of the Department of Homeland Security. We can tightly control this process with strict instructions to the various committees involved so no one can sneak in unrelated garbage and distract us from our mission. We must provide robust funding for ICE and CBP, and it should be done with all of DHS in Reconciliation 2.0. We can fund DHS for the rest of the president's term to ensure Democrats can never again take our nation's security hostage. We will never hand Democrats their ultimate prize, a defunded ICE, handcuffed CBP, and criminal aliens terrorising our communities." Okay, so what they're doing there is contradicting Trump, and they're keeping the shutdown going. Either they're going to change their mind, or the House Democrats will have to vote for this agreement to get it passed. And by the way, if they do that, that means the House Democrats are voting for ICE funding. They'll get their fingerprints on funding ICE. Or the entire DHS bill goes through reconciliation. They're your three choices. The problem with everything going through reconciliation, which seems like an obvious answer, is there are other rules you have to satisfy with reconciliation. Like, for instance, making the bill budget neutral. So they would have to come up with enough fake cuts to account for the entirety of DHS funding for 3 years. That would not be easy. DHS is expensive. So I'm betting door number 2, the House Democrats come to the party. But we will see. This still could take some time. Dr. Amber, do you have anything to say about any of those correspondences?
I think just that there's always the possibility, like you talk about legal frameworks and that we can only do reconciliation, or they can only do reconciliation once a year. There's always the Trump factor in that. Like, I was just looking up as you were speaking, Chaz, about Trump issuing that executive order on last week, I think, ordering DHS employees to get paid. And when he has a kind of bureaucracy that's willing to implement those orders, that it just kind of throws in the Trump factor that I think that, that framework, and Schumer in particular, who's used to working in that framework, just doesn't really have the tools to deal with.
Absolutely. You make the critical point. He has the bureaucracy who's willing to do it. Because, I mean, I've talked to him blue in the face about the fact these executive orders are blatantly illegal. But it doesn't matter if people are still going to carry them out. Like, if you have the people who sign the checks, willing to sign the checks, It's going to happen unless someone takes them to court. Who's going to take them to court? Who is going to say, please do not fund these vital operations? I'd love to see the person who's going to do that. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is definitely a factor. Do you have anything else to say before we move on to Iran? Okay. Now, you really have to help me out here, Dr. Emma, because I've been doing a lot of catching up. And then the story keeps moving. I'm doing my best here. But, look, I didn't have time to put together my usual kind of, death count, all that kind of stuff. I'm really chasing my tail here. There's a lot of PEPs and a lot of Planet Americas to be servicing. But I will say this. Oil prices got up to $112 a barrel before the deadline. The ceasefire was called. After the ceasefire was called, they've dropped down to $97 a barrel. Gas prices in America still going up. Here's the graph.
Yeah.
$4.16 a gallon. They're not going anywhere. To set the scene, before we get into the last 48 hours, saying like an AFL reporter. I don't know if you follow AFL or Dr. Emma, but it's hilarious.
I do.
You do? Well, you'll know that the reporters on AFL, they always like to act like they're national security reporters and stuff. They never say, this is what's happened recently. This is what's happened in the last week. This is what's happened in the last 48 hours. This is what's happened in the last 24 hours. There's been movement on the contract. It's just so...
Let's talk about the strategy.
Yeah, it's just so funny how important they think they are. But anyway, before we talk about the last 48 hours, do you have any random thoughts about the war? General thoughts? Quite aside from the last 24 or 48 hours, because it's the first time you've had a chance to talk about it, that you'd like to share with the Peppers.
I mean, I think, Jazz, my general reflection on it all is that it's a clusterfuck.
Yes.
Like, I was trying today to, piece together the timeline, and just the last 48 hours and what happened, when, and who said what. And it's basically impossible. Like, I feel like, I've been following it pretty closely, but trying to piece it together is really difficult. And I know you've spoken about the lack of transparency with this war, but it's not just a lack of transparency, it's that everyone is fucking lying as well.
And Trump constantly contradicts himself. Like, he'll just say one thing and then literally 20 seconds later he'll say the opposite.
Yeah, so it's you can't, it's kind of impossible to pass what is happening, but we're still looking for the strategy and the trying to find the logic in it somewhere. And I've been thinking a lot about that, because it is hard to believe that this is all as stupid as it seems, as stupid and pointless as it seems. But especially this idea about, and I know you spoke about this with Jared as well, that of Trump escalating in order to de-escalate, that he's using the kind of Nixon madman theory. I think what that analysis kind of misses is that for that to work, there has to be a strategy.
Yeah.
It's so deeply, and I'm not one to defend Nixon or Kissinger, but it's so deeply offensive to them because they did actually have quite an intricate strategy. Nixon wrote volumes and volumes about how to do this and how to do diplomacy. Again, not in a way that I would agree with, but there was a strategy. And
I totally understand.
There just isn't.
Nixon apologist, Dr. Emma Shortis, speaking on behalf of the Australian Institute. I totally understand where you're coming from.
I knew as soon as I said that at the start, I was going to regret it.
Go on, sorry, I interrupted.
But I think that sort of brings me, because he does, Trump always escalates. He does that in order to... He does do that, I think, in order to de-escalate or to give himself an off-ramp, as the security boys like to say. But it does seem like Iran has exposed that as the escalation trap that it is, and I think escalation trap is a really useful way of thinking about it. International relations is not often have useful phrases like that actually, are clear in what they mean. But it does seem like that is where Trump has kind of cornered himself, because he has to keep ratcheting up his threats. And then, the fact that, as we'll get to, that he appears to have backed down on this one, and I think has kind of been humiliated, means he's even more cornered, because how is he going to react to this? Once he kind of realizes, and I think we're watching the administration realize in real time what a clusterfuck this is, how does he lash out? And that's never good. So that's my somewhat incoherent, quite angry reflection on what has happened. Like, it is just an unmitigated disaster.
More than fair enough. I got two random thoughts which I haven't fit into anything so far. The first of which is, this is another one of those dogs that hasn't barked. The intelligence community, which has been such a problem in America over the last few decades as far as war predictions go, they nailed it. Like, how many times have we read about the intelligence community saying, well, this might happen if you do that, and they were absolutely vindicated. Whatever reforms they undertook as far as the competence of the intelligence community in America, it worked. Like, as far as this war's gone, I mean, the problem here was a leadership failure, not an intelligence failure. Yeah. They totally saw it coming. Also, that's the first point, because I don't think I've said that yet. So I wanted to say that on the record. And secondly, in terms of hindsight, like people looking back going, well, yeah, there's some vicious leaking going on from the Vance, the Vance support base, trying to distance him from this war. We've talked about it before on PEP, but there was an absolute doozy yesterday, which I wanted to mention from the New York Times. Did you see this article? It's basically telling a story about a key meeting where Netanyahu convinced Trump to attack Iran. And I'll quote the New York Times, the gathering had been kept deliberately small to guard against leaks. Other top cabinet secretaries had no idea what was happening. Also absent was the Vice President J.D. Vance, who was in Azerbaijan. And the meeting had been scheduled on such short notice that he was unable to make it back in time. The only one they named who wasn't there was J.D. Vance. Mm-hmm. I wonder whose supporters leaked this story. And then the story then goes on to, I'll quote you, to basically just pin the whole thing on Netanyahu. And I've been expecting this for a while, that J.D. Vance would jump on board the blame Israel train, which, that may be correct. Maybe we should blame Israel. Maybe incorrect. Maybe we shouldn't blame Israel. We should blame Trump. Or as I have mentioned before, I think we should not forget Saudi Arabia when we talk about influences on America and the Trumps. I'll read what it says first. Mr. Netanyahu and his team outlined conditions they portrayed as pointing to near certain victory. Iran's ballistic missile program could be destroyed in a few weeks. The regime would be so weakened that it could not choke off the Strait of Hormuz, and the likelihood that Iran would land blows against US interests in neighbouring countries was assessed as minimal. Besides, Mossad's intelligence indicated that street protests inside Iran would begin again, and with the impetus of the Israeli spy agency helping to foment riots and rebellion, an intense bombing campaign could foster the conditions for the Iranian opposition to overthrow the regime. The Israelis also raised the prospect of Iranian Kurdish fighters crossing the border from Iraq to open a ground front in the northwest, further stretching the regime's forces and accelerating its collapse. Mr. Netanyahu delivered his presentation in a confident monotone. It seemed to land well with the most important person in the room, the American president. Sounds good to me, Mr. Trump told the Prime Minister. So the fact that this leak portrayed Trump as a complete dupe, once again, suggests to me it's Vance's people leaking this. It's not Trump's people trying to get him off the hook by blaming Israel, because they make him look like an idiot. It'll be Vance's people going, well, Trump's an idiot. I couldn't be there to save the day. Sorry. So that's why I'm sure this was leaked by Vance's people.
It's funny to think of Vance as having people who support him.
He must somewhere. Maybe in Hungary he's got people. I don't know. But yeah, I was going to say,
not his wife. He's made her promise not to jump out of a plane.
That is true. That is an amazing clip, which we may or may not play later on. But I was going to say, I've expected for a while the Vance camp to be blaming Israel because they can't blame Trump. If they blame Trump, they hurt Trump's numbers, which hurts Vance. And if MAGA has a crack up, that hurts Vance. So they need to somehow blame someone who isn't Trump for this war, and the only available party is Israel. So I've been waiting for Vance to blame Israel. And whether he's right or not, that was always coming. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add. So Dr. Emma, can you start us off with what was going on deadline day? Because me and Jared, we took it up to deadline day. I mean, you can say something before that. I don't mind, but I'm just saying. With Jared, we took it up to deadline day. We walked out of the podcast. Literally, as soon as we walked out of recording the podcast, I see on Fox and CNN on the two TVs behind my chair the same tweet just up there, just permanently on the screens, which was Trump saying, A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. However, now that we have complete and total regime change where different, smarter and less radicalised minds prevail, maybe something revolutionary wonderful can happen. Who knows? We'll find out tonight. One of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world, 47 years of extortion, corruption and death will finally end. God bless the great people of Iran. So, Emma, take it from there.
The world does have a long and complex history, doesn't it?
You're the history doctor, you tell us.
Can confirm. So the President of the United States threatened to commit genocide. That is what happened. And I think people rightly drew from that an implicit threat to use nuclear weapons, because how do you wipe out a civilization never to return instantly? With conventional weapons, with a fair bit of difficulty. You know, it takes a while. And so implicitly that was also a threat to commit genocide by nuclear weapons, by the president of the world's most important democracy, if we can still call it that. Right? Extraordinary situation. And I think kind of confirms what many people have been saying for quite a long time. So it sounds so Trumpy. Many people have been saying around the erosion of international law and the norms around international law to use these kind of threats and to carry them out, in which the United States has obviously been complicit. So this is a horrifying situation where Trump is basically holding the whole world hostage for, what was it, like maybe 9-ish hours, 12 hours, I don't know, whatever in his time, where we didn't know, if he was going to follow through with this threat. And I think in hindsight, lots of people are kind of saying, well, of course he was never going to follow through with that threat, but I don't think that was ever clear, even to him. I don't think he knew if he was going to follow through with it.
Well, on that note, and I'll just ask you about this, you're not alone in saying that you were interpreting this as being a genuine nuclear threat. A lot of people were saying that. I must admit, when I saw the tweet, that wasn't how I interpreted it at the time. I interpreted it as Trump continuing on with his apocalyptic rhetoric, which had been going for some time, and he's just running out of headroom. He's just ramped it up so high, there's nowhere else he can go. And whatever he says, trying to ramp it up even further, just sounds like I am literally going to take the country off the map, which would be with nuclear weapons. That's true. But I just interpreted it as more apocalyptic rhetoric rather than more of him saying, I'm going to blow the shit out of the place, rather than him explicitly threatening nuclear strikes. Having said that, loads of reasonable people interpreted it as nuclear strikes, and the fact that it's open to that interpretation is a problem in itself. Even if there's not one of those times where I'm going to go, you know what, let's be fair, I'm not going to be doing that, because if you say something which a reasonable person can interpret as I am going to drop a nuclear bomb on you, that's on you. Okay, you should word things in a way that there's no ambiguity about whether you're going to use nuclear weapons. So I actually don't think it matters which way you interpret it. The fact that it's open to that interpretation is a problem enough. The other thing I would add to exactly what you just said then, we've gotten to that point where the head of this major country in the world, the world's only superpower, is making these kinds of apparent threats. Even though I didn't interpret that way, but they are interpretable that way. And the country still hasn't declared war. Congress still hasn't declared war.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons I get so worked up about these seeming legal technicalities. Congress still hasn't weighed in on this bloody thing. Now, you might say, well, the fact that they didn't vote to say it's not legitimate is good enough. That's as good as an assent. I don't think it is as good as an assent. I think you need, if you're going to start throwing around these, even at the best, the most generous interpretation of what he was saying was that he was going to commit massive war crimes. And yes, if he did go through and blow up all the desalination plants, which he threatened in the previous 2 days, that is the very definition of genocide. You don't need a nuclear bomb for genocide. So if you took him seriously at what he was actually saying, putting in words, yes, he was threatening genocide. And he was doing that without Congress yet weighing in on whether the entire war was legitimate. And I think that's a massive problem, and we just sleep on that one. So I just throw that out there as well. Another thing I'd say about that tweet, the mysterious, reasonable new regime he speaks of, that returned. This mysterious new regime. Like it's classic Trump going, I'm going to blow you up. Or maybe things work out just fine. Who knows? I mean, that does foreshadow the taco right there. But the mysterious new regime he's talking about, it turned out to be Moshtaba Khomeini, who apparently was involved in the negotiations. Is that the reasonable new regime? The guy who everyone universally declares is more radical than the Ayatollah before him? I don't know. Anyway, you keep going.
I don't know. So we have this tweet, we have this Truth Social post, we have this scramble, the whole world is waiting, and then Trump does the thing where he posts again, I think an hour-ish before the arbitrary deadline that he's set to say that there is now a ceasefire, that he has received I believe a 10-point plan from Iran, which can serve as, and this is a quote, a workable basis on which to negotiate.
Let's read the whole tweet. Let's read the whole tweet. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested they hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but the 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalised and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America, as President and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honour to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump, drink.
2 weeks, ding ding, drink, also drink.
Yes, that's right. Drink a lot.
Yeah, gosh. The first thing there, of course, is that Trump has said at the start of this post that this is conditional on the complete, total opening of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
In the 10-point plan that I think he is referring to, it says nothing of the sort. It says that the strait will open, but it will be subject to control of the Iranian armed forces, which I would interpret as they get to decide who goes through and when. And also that each ship that does go through the strait is subject to a $2 million toll shared between Iran and Oman.
Do we know whether that is going to be in place for this 2-week period, though? Because Iran did say they were opening up for 2 weeks. I don't know if that means Iran saying, yeah, we'll open up and we'll be charging you a $2 million toll, or if they're for 2 weeks you get a free trip. I don't know. Do you know?
Not clear.
No, okay.
And I'm probably getting a little bit ahead, but I don't think the strait even opened. I think given the events of the last 48 hours, even the last 12 hours, and the contention over Lebanon in particular, which
we will
I
get
assume
there.
we'll get to.
There. Yeah.
The strait, the Iranians have now said the strait, as far as where we're up to, the strait is closed.
Okay.
It never. I don't think it ever really opened.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. There are other notable things about that announcement tweet that you'd like to highlight? Because I have a couple of things, but do you have other things you want to highlight there?
Yeah. So again, we'll get to this, but the question of Lebanon and this idea of whether Lebanon is included in the ceasefire, there's a clue there, I think, in this post where he opens with the reference to conversations with the Pakistani Prime Minister, who also posted about announcing this ceasefire and was very clear that in that post, the Pakistani PM's post, that Lebanon was included in the ceasefire.
I've got this is not the post you're referring to, but I want to just talk about that Pakistani PM bit as well, a slightly different element, which was Trump did say that the Pakistani PM requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran. What he's referring to there's a tweet from the Pakistani PM earlier in the day saying diplomatic efforts for peaceful settlement of the ongoing war in the Middle East are progressing steadily, strongly and powerfully with the potential to lead to substantive results in the near future. To allow diplomacy to run its course, I earnestly request President Trump to extend the deadline for 2 weeks. Okay, so it's the Pakistan PM who set this train in motion. Except the first version of that tweet left this bit at the top. Draft, Pakistan PM's message on X. And then it was the tweet, which suggests that someone else wrote those words for that tweet, not the Pakistani PM. And look, that's fine. Doesn't mean it wasn't his sentiments. I'm sure world leaders have secretaries who draft the tweets for them. That's fine. It's just worth noting that maybe the Pakistani PM wasn't the person who actually was asking for it, but was actually it was all stitched up so that they could give Trump the excuse he needed to back down. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing was that he said the reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives. So why are you trying to destroy a whole civilization 2 hours ago?
Great question.
Thank you. Third thing, we received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe there's a workable basis on which to negotiate. You've already mentioned that Iran's 10-point plan had a lot of interesting elements to it. We are going to go through every one of them in a second. But the 10-point plan that Iran sent out, they sent out 2 days earlier.
Yeah, they did.
I read it 2 days earlier. So Trump's rhetoric intensified significantly after that peace plan was sent out. Oh, and by the way, Trump was asked about that a day earlier. This is what Trump had to say about the 10-point peace plan before he decided to use that as the whole reason for backing down.
What do you think of the latest proposal?
They've made a proposal, and it's a significant proposal. It's a significant step. It's not good enough, but it's a very significant step. They have made, they're negotiating now, and they've made a very significant step. We'll see what happens.
I like the concessions that Trump has made to Dr. Dave's constant complaining about helicopters being in the background of his impromptu Q&As. You know, he's ditched the helicopter and he's replaced them with like a funk band. It's a very loud funk band, but still, I kind of like it. It's nice, much better. Anyway, wow, that changed over 24 hours, didn't it? It went from not good enough to, wow, this is very significant and this is a good reason for a ceasefire. So I would note that as well. It smacks to me of Trump trying to get Iran to concede, failing, and then when his bluff is called, he settles for whatever excuse he can find, which was, there's a 10-point plan there. I'll say it's that. Before we go on to more about whether it's a fold or not and all that kind of stuff about this ceasefire, I want to just talk a little bit more about the negotiation that was going on leading up to this, because I think it's relevant to where we're going. There was a lot of war crime talk. We just had some of it just now about what Trump was saying. I said that he was threatening war crimes. I said that to Jared. I said there's a balancing test about whether the infrastructure provides more military advantage than civilian suffering. And this did not pass the balancing test. Now, I read some people saying that my understanding, they weren't talking about me, they're not peppers, sadly, but I read some commentary from people, often conservative, saying that my take was too rosy and that if the target makes an effective contribution to military action and whose total or partial destruction, capture or neutralization in the circumstances ruling at the time offers a definitive military advantage, then that's enough to be a legit military target under the Geneva Convention. Although, when in doubt, it's considered not a military target. That was the tougher definition for war crimes that I understood than I understood to be the case. But that's what some people were saying. I want to emphasise, because this is going to come back in 2 weeks' time. So I want to emphasise right now. Mm-hmm. Either way, Trump left us in no doubt at all when he said this.
You said that very little is off limits in Iran as far as targeting, including power plants, bridges, you've mentioned those.
Very little is off limits.
Are there certain kinds of civilian targets, though? I'm thinking schools
I don't want to
or
tell you that.
hospitals that you
I don't want to
say
tell you
is
that.
off-
We have a plan because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours if we wanted to. We don't want that to happen.
Every bridge, every power plant, out of business, never to be used again. By anyone's definition, that's a war crime. Whether you use my one, whether you use the stricter one, it doesn't matter. War crimes. The never to be used again bit is particularly important because there's many ways you can blow up a power plant. You can set off a graphite bomb that takes it out of action temporarily, and then it's back. That's what America has done in the past. But lots of people have said, America blew up power plants in the Iraq war all the time. Why didn't people say that was a war crime? They were using graphite bombs to take them out of action briefly for military purposes, and then they were back in action. They did the same in Serbia as well. And there's another way. You can bomb the transformers, which takes the power plant out of action for a short period of time, a couple of weeks. And then you can replace the transformers really easily. That's another way. Or you can target their generating hulls, which will put them out of action for like 6 months. Now, when Trump says, out of business, never to be used again, there is only one way you can interpret that. That is not a military use. The military use would only affect them during the war. If you're trying to affect them for 6 months, that's collective punishment. That's punishing the civilians, not punishing the military. So there is no doubt, there is no ambiguity that he is talking about war crimes here. I say this for 2 weeks' time. That's it. So there's that. Now to the press.
And it's worth, I know you've emphasised this before, Chaz, but like it's worth saying that they don't care. Like Peter Hegseth said at the start, this is a war that they will fight unbound by the stupid rules of engagement. It's a war they will fight with no mercy. Like they keep telling us, who they are and what they're going to do, and we should believe them. Yeah,
I agree. And look, I might be wrong, but I think the adjective stupid is a direct quote from Pete Hegseth as what he referred to the rules of engagement as.
Stupid rules of engagement.
Yeah, incredible. the Secretary of Defense, stupid. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Secretary of War, sorry. Now, to the press's credit, they did explicitly ask Trump, isn't this a war crime? And this was his response.
Mr. President, how would it not be a war crime to strike Iran's bridges and power plants?
Because they killed 45,000 people in the last month. More than that. I think it could be as much as 60. They kill protesters. They're animals. And we have to stop them, and we can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They want a nuclear weapon. They've been trying for a long time. I stopped them with the Obama horrible Iran nuclear deal. I stopped them in a lot of different ways. We got rid of Soleimani, the evil genius. He was an evil genius. We got rid of him. And then we stopped him with the B-2 bombers not so long ago. And if we didn't do it, Israel and the Middle East would have been extinguished by now.
They are animals. They killed 45,000 of their own people. We can't let them have a nuclear weapon. So if they don't reopen the Strait of Hormuz, we will blow up all the people's power plants and maybe their desalination plants. Make that make sense to me. No.
I can't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add in this area, this war crimes area?
Not necessarily war crimes, but just to go back to that original Trump destruction of civilization tweet. Like it's a small thing, but to use the word, the ceasefire post, to use the word consummated, they're going to consummate the deal. Like what does that mean? Yeah. It's disgusting. And I just wanted to point listeners, like you might have come across it before, but Jamel Bowie is a amazing commentator. He writes for the New York Times and does a great kind of analysis videos. But he describes the ideology of the Trump administration and particularly its foreign and security policy as the ideology of a rapist. Mm. And I think that's a really powerful and accurate way of thinking about the way Trump thinks about what he's doing. You know, when he uses words like consummate, when he talks about having the honour of taking Cuba that you and Dr. Dave talked about a couple of episodes ago, you know, this is how this man thinks about his role in the world and the role of the United States in the world as it's like an ideology of a rapist. It's an ideology of conquest. And I think just kind of keeping that at the front of your mind alongside exactly what we've been talking about around war crimes and the fact that they don't care and that they're treating, you know, they're describing Iranians as animals and talking about bombing them back to the Stone Ages. Like, this is them telling us who they are and what they believe.
Did you see how some of the MAGA base were responding on deadline day? Because it seemed to me that this was the first time that we've seen some real movement from a number of hardcore MAGA people going, oh, don't like where this is going. Like it's the first time I've seen actual discussion. I mean, look, there are some people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, by the way, was calling for the 25th Amendment on deadline day. Like she went some time ago, and Alex Jones, he's been moving against Trump for a while. He really went hard on deadline day. I'll play his little exchange.
How do we 25th Amendment his ass?
The problem is to get the 25th Amendment is harder than impeachment. You have to get 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate.
So what do we do?
Tackle Trump and pretend, let him pretend he's president and publicly report that he's going through a health issue and Vance take over. It literally needs to be something like that. It's that bad.
That last guy was Robert Barnes, who was interviewing. And Alex Jones also tweeted, war crime alert, Trump on Iran, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. The definition of genocide is destroying an entire civilization / people. Trump literally sounds like an unhinged supervillain from a Marvel comic movie. This is not what we voted for. Now, Alex Jones has been moving for the last couple of weeks, I think, slowly away from Trump. This was a clip from, I think, 2 weeks ago, maybe last week. It's from before this episode, where he was already starting to edge away from Trump.
When your ankles swell up 3 times the size they were before, that means heart failure. And he does look sick. And he does babble and, sound like the brain's not doing too hot. And so we just cut bait on Trump, and we just mobilize against the Democrats. And we mobilize against neocons, we primary them, and we just fight even harder, because look at how we've turned the tide. Look at all the good we've done. There's a fourth turning. Populists, nationalists, conservatives are winning everywhere. There's a Christian reawakening. And Trump is just a minor figure in all of that now. And we have to be appreciative of the old Trump that went through so much and got so much done. And that's the Trump we remember. And we're just sad because that happens. We need to be sad about Trump. This is not funny. This is not good. But he's gone. And that's it.
Like, he's going on the Trump old train, and which I understand. I've been doing it recently myself. There was a bit of this. Tucker Carlson was going crazy. Tucker Carlson was intimating that he might be the Antichrist. I'm not going to play the clip because it goes forever, and it's. I want to be very clear. He wasn't saying he's the Antichrist, but it was just these allusions to, is this about demonism, and is this about Trump trying to attain a higher position than President of the United States? Is this about Trump? Yeah, like is he trying to defeat faith? Is he trying to, he was just hedging around, but he was pretty extreme. But what I ask you, though, the reason I'm bringing this up is, before we get into the ins and outs of the ceasefire, the technical side, we're saying he shouldn't blow up Iran. I think we can all agree on that. He didn't blow up Iran. He was looking for the taco all along, which was no surprise. Jared and I both predicted it. It came. Yep. I said he was going to bomb something first. He bombed Karg Island. He bombed a couple of bridges, and then he went to taco. So it was predictable, and he did it. And he's responding to some of his base who are going, this has gone way too far. And he's responding to us. He's responding to a lot of people. So, should we be down on him for taking this on the ride if it was just to get the best possible result in the negotiation, and he never intended to blow them up all along? There are conservatives who are going, one second you're saying he's a madman who wants to blow up Iran, and the next second you're saying he's a coward for not going through with it. Do they have a fair point? Should we be inverted commas grateful that he is not insane?
I don't think he's insane.
Yeah.
I think you were right. You said in the last episode, Chaz, that he seems like he's losing it. You know, when he posted about opening the fucking strait, that seemed like, you know, it wasn't the obscenity that was a problem, but it seemed like he was losing control.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, all he knows how to do is that, like, escalate to de-escalate, you know, threaten, bully people into making the kind of deal that he wants. The problem here is that cannot work. Like, this situation has spiraled so quickly and so predictably, so far out of his control that is not going to work. And partly because the Iranians understand him, I think, better than he understands himself. They understand American politics and American war fighting, and so I think they were able to call his bluff. But that was a big call. Like, I don't know about you, Chaz, but I don't think there was certainty that he wouldn't in some way follow through on this threat. Maybe not to the full extent of it, maybe not to using nuclear weapons, for example. But, like, we know he's done this before. Like, he's willing to use this kind of violence. You know, he's willing to strike a bridge, and then, according to reports, you know, he's willing to do things like have double trap strikes, alleged double trap strikes happen. He's willing to use, you know, huge so-called bunker busting bombs. Like, there is an escalatory ladder here that he is on, and I don't think he entirely knows how to get off of it. And as you say, like, what happens in the next 2 weeks or in the next week or whatever, as he kind of realizes this humiliation and gets more and more angry and frustrated that this war isn't going the way that he expected it to. It's not going the same way as Venezuela. So that, I think that spiraling is a real risk, and especially when you've got actors like we mentioned Netanyahu, you mentioned the Saudis, Chaz, like, who all have their own interests in keeping the US involved in that region. And when you've got that playing off against a base potentially that's getting restless about this war, you know, how he responds and how much room he's got to move, I think, is all up in the air. And it's clear that there's not a strategy, because, you know, if you're escalating to de-escalate, then, you know, you've got a plan for how it will turn out. You know, you've got a best case scenario, and he clearly has not gotten that. Like, we're going to get into the 10 points. He hasn't got anywhere near that. He's got the United States and the world into a much worse situation than it was before he started this war, in that the strait is closed, and it seems as though it's remaining closed for the foreseeable, and the ripple effects of the conflict are, you know, potentially at least getting worse and worse. And all the incentives for Iran are to keep it that way, to keep control of the strait. And it's not clear to me what Trump could offer them, or what he'd be even willing to offer them, that could generate a genuine off-ramp and a genuine prospects for diplomacy. So that's a long way of saying, like, I don't think there is a strategy. I don't think Trump understands what he's unleashed. I think we're seeing the administration realize in real time just how out of control that is. And you know, as we get into the kind of back and forth of what's happening, you can see that happening. You can see, like, Carolyn Leavitt getting more and more frustrated and angry about the reporting and how it's being handled. Vance is saying some pretty wild shit as well. Like, it's a total mess. I don't think there's any strategy. I don't think any of them know what they're doing. Okay, should we talk about these 10 points then? Sure.
Okay. Number 1, a guarantee of non-aggression. That's fine, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, but, like, as the Iranians have said, why would they ever believe
Yeah.
a guarantee of non-aggression from the United States?
Sure, but whether Iran believes it or not, like, I'm trying from America's point of view, that's not an unreasonable thing to have in the ceasefire. So that's okay. I'll just be clear. This is Iran's proposed 10-point plan, which Trump said is something that they can work through with in negotiations. All right. Number 2, Iran will continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. You've already referred to this a bit. Do you have more to say about that, or are you happy with what you've said so far?
I mean, not just that it's, a shocking turn of events and an amazing precedent that, you know, the free shipping and the free movement of goods has been like a central plank of US foreign policy and US contributions to, what we often describe as the international rules-based order. And Trump might have just overseen the end of that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a massive concession. If that is the only concession they make, if they make only one concession and get everything else that they want, that is still a massive step backwards for America versus Iran. That concession. That's huge for a number of reasons. Like you say, it's not just against what America's been trying to do. It's against the rules, the law of the sea. It's against the law. Yeah. It's Article 37, if you're interested. There's supposed to be a non-negotiable right of transit passage for international straits, which is what this is.
And like the basis of American economic power for decades.
Totally. It would also completely undermine any attempt to have any sanctions against Iran in future, because they can always make money through the strait.
Yep.
So you can block off their oil, you can block off whatever you like, but just the strait alone will keep them going if they can charge tolls. So and it gives them a ready-made means of punishing you, however much they like in the future. If they have control over it, they can punish the world. Like I've said this before, they don't need a nuclear weapon if they have control over the strait. They can have the same effect. Now, I've had some cynical peppers in the comments. One in particular at one point in time said, Iran don't care about having control of the strait versus a nuclear bomb because they can't blow up Israel with control of the strait, suggesting that the nuclear bomb is entirely about blowing up Israel, whereas the Dr. Dave theory is it's about protecting Iran. It's the
Gaddafi.
Yeah, and the North Korea and the North Korea precedent.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, look, you can make up your own mind. It could be both.
I think it could be both too.
The important thing is that it's handing Iran a massive weapon that they didn't have before. If you give them control of the strait,
I was just going to say it also, in terms of sanctions, it presents this opportunity for Iran to emerge out of isolation while simultaneously further isolating the United States, because it incentivizes the rest of the world to go around the United States and negotiate directly with Iran and work with each other without the United States, which is exactly what is happening, where 40 plus countries had a meeting last week, maybe, to sort of begin to create a strategy to open up the Strait of Hormuz that didn't involve the United States, because everybody can see that the United States is the problem here, alongside Iran, of course. But the incentives are all to negotiate directly with Iran, or to negotiate as a bloc with Iran and avoid the United States. And like that, I think that's part of the reason Pakistan is, willing to act as an intermediary in this, because they all have an interest in getting carve-outs from the Iranians. The Iranians have shown willingness to give carve-outs to other nations. It wouldn't be surprising if those carve-outs are more forthcoming to countries that don't have good relationships with the United States, that aren't supporting the United States in its war on Iran. So all this is doing is even further isolating the United States. And Trump it seems like Trump knows it. Like he doesn't care. Like he takes pride in it. But, when he lists off all the countries that aren't helping him, and says, all of NATO didn't help, Australia didn't help, Japan didn't help, South Korea didn't help. He's just listing, all the countries that are against him, in this, and just demonstrating to everyone how isolated he is. So it's such an incredible self-own. It's unbelievable.
And it's not just dealing with Iran or behind America's back. It's dealing with China. Because Iran is insisting that people trade in yuan if they want to go through the Strait of Hormuz. That's a big deal. That's a real big deal. That takes away a lot of America's international influence with a lot of countries, not just Iran. So that's huge. And by the way, also a nightmare for America's greatest allies in the region, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. They do not want Iran controlling that strait. They've been riding shotgun on this war the whole time so that Iran does not have control over this strait. So that they would see this as a massive stab in the back. And if Trump agreed to this, it would certainly undermine severely my suggestion that Saudi Arabia was had a certain influence on the war starting, because he ain't listening to Saudi Arabia now if he agrees to that. I'll tell you that. Anyway, so that's the straight. That's number 2. That's a big one. Number 3, accepting an Iranian right to enrich uranium. Now, isn't that interesting? Would you care to talk to that one?
So this is one of the ones that has, one of the many ones that has been this point of contention, because Trump's acceptance, apparent initial acceptance of this 10-point plan as a basis from which to negotiate, as you said, Chaz, had been rejected just 2 days before, partly because of that, right? Because this had been a red line. This had been an explicit red line for the Trump administration, that the Iranians would not be able to enrich uranium, that this was unacceptable. And partly for that reason, Leavitt has come out and said that this is unacceptable. Like, actually, this plan is unacceptable, and like it should be. And to be clear, the agreement that Trump scrapped, the agreement that the Obama administration had negotiated with Iran, had kind of solved this problem. And it all goes back, to Trump's desperate need to undo everything that Obama did, only to find to have placed the United States potentially in a much worse position. I mean, I don't know about you, Chaz, but I don't think this clause will necessarily remain, at least not publicly. There'll be some negotiation around it, but the fact that the Iranians were game enough to put it in, and that Trump apparently accepted it, again, is pretty catastrophically embarrassing for Trump. Yeah. Look, I mean, I find it difficult to imagine that could be in the final agreement, because that would be a very hard element for Trump to spin. Yeah, I can't see how he can accept that. Trump, by the way, has already contradicted it in a tweet. He tweeted out, "There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all of the deeply buried nuclear dust." I think he means the enriched uranium. Nuclear dust. Yeah, and also that tweet is after the ceasefire, I should say. Also, a senior Israeli official told Axios that Netanyahu, when they sought his agreement to the deal, he was given explicit assurances that America would insist in peace talks that Iran give up its nuclear material, cease enrichment, and abandon its ballistic missile threat, is what he was told. Everybody's lying. Yeah. Well, I was going that's actually going to be a question I'm planning to ask you when we go through 10 points. Who's lying here? Because there's a lot of contradiction going on. Yeah. There may be a potential middle ground. When you parse what everyone's saying, there may be a potential middle ground where the final negotiation is that Iran gives up their nuclear dust, gives up their enriched uranium, but Trump lets them continue to enrich to a degree, to a small degree. So for civilian uses. Yeah, so they retain the right to enrich, but he says if you enrich more than X, we're going to blow you up. The bombs will come back. And then it's going to be about, are they secretly enriching? Are they not? Because, of course, there won't be the checks and balances that existed under the nuclear deal that existed before, which would, if there's any enrichment whatsoever, it's going to be tougher. So it's going to be a looser agreement, a laxer agreement than what existed under the nuclear deal before. Because the nuclear deal, they were basically enriching to 3%, which is nothing, and there was constant scrutiny of what they were doing. And I predict the next 2-3 years, wherever they agree to, it's going to be Israel says that they're enriching more than they say they are, and we don't know, and satellites say this, and who knows, and ambiguity. When before there were inspectors in there watching. But anyway, number 4, lifting of all primary sanctions. Do you have anything to say to that? Just again, what a win that would be for Iran if that happens. That alongside the toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz, that's kind of the wildest dreams of the Iranian regime. Again, I don't think that would end up in any final ceasefire agreement. But even talking about a final ceasefire agreement is a big if. The sanctions have been in place since 1979, including under Obama's nuclear deal. The only time they haven't been in place is in the last 2 weeks, since the Trump administration lifted them in order to try and keep oil prices down. I should say, so stupid. The entire time this has been going on, Trump has been
has held that up as a possibility that they were going to remove the sanctions.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think they're going to remove the sanctions. I think that's something that Trump doesn't care about. We'll see.
Republicans will care about that.
That's true. But, the Republicans...
Lindsey Graham will care about that.
Lindsey Graham will definitely care about that. But Lindsey Graham, I'm not sure he's got much of a spine when it comes to standing up to Trump. We'll see.
Oh, why would you think that?
Yeah. But anyway, there's that. Lifting of all secondary sanctions is number 5. For those who don't know what the secondary sanctions are, they're basically bans on banking and finance with regards to Iran, and also Iran trading oil. Like the secondary sanctions on companies either dealing with Iran financially or dealing with their oil. If they deal with Iran, they get sanctions on them. Yep. That's what the secondary sanctions are. Do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I don't reckon. No? I mean, it's sort of same applies.
Same, yeah. I should say that Iran is completely undermining that by insisting on one base trade for people using the Strait. America won't even know who's dealing with Iran if they're dealing in yuan rather than American dollars. So control of the Strait seriously undermines even the existence of secondary sanctions. Mm-hmm. So there is that as well. Number 6, termination of Security Council resolutions. Now, I don't know which ones they're talking about particularly here. I know they're trying to drop a 2025 arms embargo, which that'd be a pretty big deal if you're worried about their missiles and going, well, hey, and Iran can buy whatever weapons they like. Lindsey Graham wouldn't be happy about that one either. Let's just put that way.
Well, Lockheed Martin might be. So
yeah, no, they'd be happy. Number 7, termination of all IAEA Board of Governors resolutions. That's the Atomic Energy Board. They're mostly about transparency in the nuclear program. All things that existed under the nuclear deal that no longer exist. If they don't get this, or if they do get this, it'll be way easier for them to covertly rebuild their nuclear program. But having said that, Israel seemed to have every second Iranian on their books before the war, so maybe they're going to again. I don't know. So do you have any comment to make about that, the Board of Governors resolutions from the IAEA?
No, I mean, again, just how it is or would be such a backward step from, where we started.
Yep. Number 8, payment of reparations to Iran. That's an interesting one. Now, that sounds on the surface ridiculous by anyone's standards. But having said that, it's actually less ridiculous than you think. What they mean by that is recovery. Yeah. What they mean by that is, hey, if you're going to blow up all our power stations, you're going to help us rebuild them. That's what that means. They've already suggested a compromise where reparations recovery money actually just comes from the tolls. That's the justification for the tolls. Where America goes, okay, you can have your tolls. That's how you're going to pay for your recovery. And a fallback, other Arab nations have suggested Iran has just billions and billions of frozen dollars in Qatar. And Qatar could allow them that money to finance their recovery effort. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Might also want to use some of that money to repair their own stuff.
Yeah, they might. They might. Especially if Iran now has control of the Strait. Yes. I actually think that one, I think that's going to happen.
You reckon?
Like reparations is the kind of thing which on Fox News they go, reparations, get stuffed. But I actually think what I just said, like you're allowed to charge a toll to help rebuild the country. If they have a deal which they're happy with, I could see Trump letting them do that. He's not.
Yeah, didn't he say something about helping rebuild as well?
He said potentially. Yeah, he said potentially.
Because the grab real estate agent.
The grab we played before about him saying that we might blow up every single power plant and bridge. We have a plan to blow up every power plant and bridge. After the bit which I played, the next thing he said after that was saying, "Yeah, we might help you rebuild if you play ball." Yeah, he has held out the opportunity there. Do you have anything else to say about the reparations point? No. Okay, number 9, withdrawal of US combat forces from the region. That's interesting. So you'd think America first, they'd be very happy to withdraw all the combat forces from the region. You'd think that that's one of those things where the horseshoe on the right and the left would be delighted to say, let's get the hell out of the Middle East. But, I'm not sure Israel would like them doing that. I'm not sure their Gulf allies would like them doing that. I think Qatar and UAE and Bahrain are all very happy to have American military bases in their country. So, especially after Iran gets all these concessions and can buy weaponry. So, I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think the Gulf states are maybe a bit less happy about having US bases in their region after the last few weeks because it's clearly made them a target.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess underlying that, what I would say is part of, when we're talking about this kind of spiraling out of control, there are so many kind of implicit pacts that underlie or have underlied relative stability in the Gulf, where, Gulf states have had this kind of security guarantee or close to a security guarantee from the United States, in return for which they're willing to not say anything, for example, not really say anything about what Israel is doing in Gaza, despite the resistance and fury and devastation of their populations. There are all these kind of unspoken pacts going on in negotiations with the Saudis and the Israelis, and the potential for what Trump has done to destabilise all of that, to destabilise the implicit agreements that the United States has long held with Gulf states, I think is pretty significant, especially when you consider that, the Gulf states are all, some variation on hereditary monarchies or absolute monarchies who are often acting against the interests of their population and are themselves juggling that, dealing with significant resistance, often putting down resistance. Trump has made that a lot harder because he's made the benefits of them doing that not quite so significant and has put a lot of them at risk. So I guess that's what I mean, partly at least, about the whole thing potentially spiraling further and further out of control, because all of that underlying stuff is being destabilised. And the Iranian regime is well aware of that, and that's partly why they've put these things in, to deliberately do that.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of spiralling, number 10, ceasefires on all fronts to stop all the spiralling, Emma, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon, we've foreshadowed talking about this a number of times now. Let's talk about it. Is it happening? Is it not happening? I read Fox News. They said that Israel agreed that it did include Lebanon, but then I read a quote from Israel saying it does not include Lebanon. Israel has kept on bombing Lebanon like it doesn't include Lebanon. The Pakistani PM, like you said on Twitter, said it does include Lebanon. I don't know what to do, how to take this. What are your thoughts?
Again, my thoughts are that pretty much everybody is lying or didn't think about it. So as you said, Chaz, the Pakistani PM was really clear in that post on Twitter that it did include Lebanon, but almost immediately Benjamin Netanyahu said, nah, it doesn't include Lebanon, and did what he consistently does and sabotage this very shaky ceasefire, initiated a huge wave of strikes, Israeli strikes against Lebanon, killed over 250 people and injured over 800 people overnight, Wednesday, Thursday, our time. And this is, in the context of over 1 million people already displaced in Lebanon, about 1,500 killed. Again, numbers are hard to get. There's not a lot of transparency. So this is the scale of the attacks, to the point where the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is not known for its political interventions, issued a statement saying that it was outraged by the devastating death and destruction in Lebanon, which is really significant for the Red Cross to say that. Absolutely.
And you can't tell me that that's not intentional, the timing.
That's absolutely.
There's no way that's a coincidence that he happens to launch his biggest wave in weeks, hours after the ceasefire, where it's ambiguous whether it counts Lebanon or not. He had to be doing it on purpose.
100%.
Yeah. So
he absolutely was. Yeah. And I think this is probably one of those cases where Trump hadn't really paid attention to that bit. I mean, is that unfair, do you think?
No, I don't think it is unfair. I think you're right.
I think he didn't pay attention.
I think he was in car sales mode. I think he would just take anything. If they said, hand over Eric, he'd go, yep, no worries. Okay, here we go. Eric, piss off.
Do you want Tiffany as well?
No, absolutely. I think so.
Yeah. So then Trump, so he didn't really say anything about Lebanon. But then he said later that it was he described it as a separate skirmish, and Netanyahu said the strikes will continue. The thing that really stood out to me was our mate JD Vance, who was not in the States, he was in Hungary campaigning for Viktor Orban. He had then said, and I'm going to read it, that the evident contradictions over Lebanon, he said, come from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that that was going to be the case. Okay, maybe. But then he said, in response to a post by the Iranian parliamentary speaker who was saying that the ceasefire had already been violated, that the ceasefire did include Lebanon and therefore it had been violated. JD Vance said, I actually wonder how good he is at understanding English, because there are things that he said that frankly didn't make sense in the context of negotiations. So this is how these negotiations are going to go, because JD Vance is the same guy leading the US team that's going to go to Islamabad in Pakistan to actually try and negotiate a proper deal and a proper ceasefire alongside Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. So I think that statement about how good the Iranians are at understanding English is an indication of just how well this diplomacy is going to go.
In particular, that guy, Galbraith, who happens to be the one person, I shouldn't say one, but one of the few people that the Americans think they can negotiate with. Yeah. The Americans have not a lot of confidence in negotiations with a lot of the people in power in Iran, but Galbraith is one who they think, he's certainly not moderate, but they think he's a pragmatist. They think that they can potentially negotiate with him. So if JD Vance is just strafing him, that's not a good sign. Yeah.
It really isn't. And Vance is like put up as the best negotiator, like the person in the best position to come to a deal. And he's basically calling like the person he should most be able to work with an idiot who doesn't speak English. In the context of all the other racist shit that Trump has said about Iranians, like, great. Really excellent strategy.
I suppose JD Vance would say, oh, well, I'm saying he didn't do it in bad faith. I'm being positive here. I'm saying it's just a misunderstanding. That's all.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay,
I'm
JD.
sure that's what he meant.
All right, my question for you is the question I've already foreshadowed. All right. Number one, actually, before that, is this the same 10-point plan? Is it possible we're talking about different 10-point plans here? No one has confirmed that when Trump talked about 10-point plans, he meant the 10-point plan that we've seen. There could be another 10-point plan behind the scenes. We don't know.
We don't know.
We're just making
and I saw reporting as well saying that the 10-point plan, the English version was slightly different to the one that was circulating in Iran as well. And I just don't know. I can't figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah. So there is that. We should remember that. Because also Trump tweeted out that many of the 15 points have already been agreed to, him referring to his own 15-point plan, which is completely contradictory to the 10-point plan that we know. Either there's a lot of lying going on. Once again, the Emma theory, they're all lying, which sounds credible to me. Or maybe they are all coming off different plans that we know publicly, because no one's confirming anything. There's such a lack of transparency in everything involving this war. My second question, if Trump just agreed to at least consider Iran's 10-point plan, then why did it require Pakistan and China, we heard later on, to twist Iran's arm to accept it? If Trump was just going, yeah, I'll take your plan, let's negotiate, let's go. Why wasn't Iran going, yeah, sure, cool, let's go, let's negotiate this baby? Why weren't they throwing a party? Why didn't they pull out the little trumpets on New Year's Eve? Why didn't they go nuts? Where were the streamers? Why'd they need to have days of having their arm twisted if Trump just folded 100%? The fact that they did need China and they did need Pakistan says to me there's more nuance behind the scenes than we are aware of. I don't know what, I'm not suggesting what it is, but just something doesn't add up to me that if Trump has just pathetically folded, why aren't they accepting it? Well, they did, but only after days and days of being berated by their allies. What's going on? What am I missing? Any thoughts there?
I mean, I wish I knew what you were missing. I don't know if it's nuance going on behind the scenes so much as just a total mess in that, it seemed to come as a surprise to the rest of the White House that Trump posted this out and that he'd, ostensibly accepted whichever version of this 10-point plan it is we're talking about. And it's not clear that Trump even knew, which version he was necessarily talking about because, of course, he, as you said earlier, Chaz, he changes his story every couple of minutes. So I don't think there's a way for us to know what is going on here. I mean, I think, the Iranian regime, of course, has its own interests at play here, including its own survival. And, so maybe it was holding out for more concessions. Maybe it thought that it could call Trump's bluff even further, that it could get even more out of him. It could humiliate him even more. It does seem that within Iran as well, there's some push and pull going on within the regime. It's not clear what the power dynamics are between, we talked about the parliamentary speaker, and there's also the Iranian Security Council, there's the Supreme Leader, there's a diffused Revolutionary Guard as well, that's leadership is quite necessarily diffused. In part of what happened in the aftermath of the ceasefire announcement was the Iranians asked for a little bit of patience because the networks of the Revolutionary Guard are so diffused that it was actually going to take a little while for all of the communications to get through because they've, for strategic reasons, they've kind of isolated themselves from each other. So I think it's incredibly messy, but I think it's really important you also raise that the role that China is playing in pushing Iran closer towards a deal and presenting itself as the kind of sensible, calm voice of reason in all of this, the one that is solid and dependable. I don't buy into the kind of great power competition binary, but, the Chinese government is watching this very closely and, staying out of it for the most part, but then playing quite an influential role and I think building up those relationships. And I don't think Trump appreciates any of that mess or nuance. He's only thinking about himself and how this looks for him that. And that's what they're all doing. That's what JD Vance is doing. He's thinking about himself and wanting to be president. They're all playing their stupid little games.
That, to me, sounds like a pretty good note to go out on. I've got one more question for you. Is this literally we're just going to literally have exactly the same thing in 2 weeks? Or have we got the situation now where Trump is just buying enough time for him to redefine what a victory is so he can declare victory and he won't need another standoff in 2 weeks. He can just go home in 2 weeks and go, yeah, we did it. We did it. We got everything that I said we'd get. Just don't look at the tapes from 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, he already posted it, didn't he? All the military objectives have been achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Look, for the last 6 weeks, I've been trying to talk about Polymarket. How much I hate what they're doing during this war. Those of you who are informed will know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to do a rant on them at some point in time. Let me foreshadow it because I'm going to skip it again because we've got so much to talk about. Screw Polymarket. They're not distracting me. I want to talk about Artemis because I was delighted when I was going through. I gave you a long list. I think you'll agree. It was a very long list.
It was quite long, guys, yes.
Of all the topics that we could potentially talk about because there's so much that happens in America. And I said, is there anything here that appeals to you, Dr. Emma? Let me know and we'll talk about it. And you were in all caps, Artemis. And you said, I'm a space fan. I had no idea about this. So I'm so excited about this because this is the antidote to the horrible bitter taste we all have in our mouth after the last hour and 20 minutes. So let's talk about something nice. Dr. Emma, tell us all about Artemis.
I'm going to start by saying I don't know that I'll quite get the bitter taste out of your mouth. I'm sorry. There's still, there's still Trumpiness in it. It is super cool. Like, it's way more, I think it is genuinely more fun and cool than what we've been talking about. But again, the bar is very low. I do love space, Chaz. This is this is where my love of America comes from. I'm just going to preface it and say my dad did contract work for NASA. He's a measurement scientist. So when I lived in the States as a young child and kind of fell in love with it, it was because my dad was doing super cool work. So I am I guess my love of space is genetic. So I've been following Artemis very closely, and in prepping for this, I kind of went back a bit to where this all came from, because it's been a while, and it actually goes back to the first Trump administration. So Trump kind of put these plans in place for this Artemis mission way back in 2017 when he signed Space Policy Directive 1, which was about returning Americans to the moon and then getting them to Mars. So he announced this during his first term in 2019. Vice President Mike Pence, remember him?
I do.
He said, he put a timeline on it. So he said that the US would put Americans back on the moon by 2024, and that once they were there, they'd build a permanent station that would serve as this launch pad to Mars. And so that's when the Artemis program was actually born. And I think, to go back to my earlier point about how we can't get the gross taste out of our mouth, it sort of highlights the tension at the heart of all of this, because NASA called this program Artemis after the Greek goddess who is a twin sister of Apollo, first space mission. Right? So it's like Apollo for a new generation, and it's Trump's attempt to kind of chase the grandeur and verve of John F. Kennedy, to be a president, just just as beloved, just as influential as JFK. But he can't do it, right? Because he's driven by this hyper-masculine need to dominate everything, and by this kind of individualistic need to dominate everything. So for Trump, the Artemis, the idea of naming this after a goddess rather than a god, the idea of putting the first woman on the moon, which NASA has said is part of the plan, obviously it's not about that for Trump. It's all about kind of Elon Musk-like colonization of space. And this, I mentioned it before, this kind of ideology of conquest, and particularly gendered conquest. So Trump talks about it in very specific terms, where he'll say this is about embracing the next frontier, America's manifest destiny in the stars, which he's said a couple of times. And he also talks about American dominance in space, that this is the new warfighting domain, and we're doing this because we need to have dominance in space. Old mate Vice President Mike Pence said that it was all necessary. This space program, Space Force as well, which was all part of it, was necessary because America must be as dominant in the heavens as it is on Earth.
Right. Leaving aside all the chat about dominance, from them I'm talking about, not from you. We should just be clear here that their sense of competition didn't come from nowhere. China is working on their own program for the moon at the moment as well. I think there is a race factor. Again, like Apollo, there is actually a space race going on. Whether the race element matters or not, they certainly are aware of it.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And the Artemis Accords, which are a kind of agreement that brings in other countries, including Australia, into supporting this mission, explicitly excluded both China and Russia. So certainly it is a competition, and a symbolic one as well, because there's no real need to put people on these spacecrafts. Probably robots could do a much more efficient job, but and that's the route the Chinese have taken in their space missions. And so it's like a hearts and minds thing, that JFK was so good at, but Trump, not so much. So I guess back to Artemis. So Trump makes this big announcement about getting Americans back on the moon. They announced Space Force as well. And NASA at the time, which has faced like budget cut after budget cut, the shuttle program's gone, sees this opportunity and like grabs it with both hands to get money for a new space program. And so they do, they start the Artemis program. Artemis I launched in 2022. It was like an uncrewed lunar test flight that sort of saw a few hurdles but got there eventually. And then they get to Artemis II, which is the fun one that's been included group hugs in space. And so that was launched on the 1st of April US time with 4 crew members, including 2 white dudes, a black guy and a woman. And one of the white dudes is Canadian, which I just think is hilarious because it's like DEI in space. It's so anti-Trump. Like it's a program named after a goddess, putting a woman in space and sending a woman further from the Earth than any woman has been before. Yeah,
I was going to say the Canadian is the smallest minority in the ship. In terms of the people they represent.
Yeah. But the crew, like the crew is so wholesome. Like they're so lovely and have just been, because you have basically kind of like almost 24-hour access to video. Like NASA's been live streaming a lot of it, including super fun, like cringy but fun stuff about like what song they play to wake up the astronauts in the morning. Including Pink Pony Club by Chapel Roan, which was my favourite choice. And so there's been like these amazing, I don't know about you, Chaz, but like it's been so jarring because it has been this like wonderful, wholesome thing, of crew members like looking after each other, working together, like demonstrating how effective diversity can be in achieving like pretty remarkable things. All the while, all the other shit we were just talking about is happening. All the while we're like waiting to see if there's going to be a nuclear apocalypse. Like it's so incredibly jarring and like so two such contrasting versions of America happening at the same time. Like I just think it's wild. And the mission has been like it went basically flawlessly. Like almost nothing went wrong. The toilet broke for a little while, so there's been lots of talk about like how toilets work in space and what you do when the toilet breaks. Gross but also funny. So like the Orion craft has worked. It's demonstrated that people can survive on it and that NASA can work towards its aim of an actual moon landing by 2028. I mean, it is ambitious. Like it's already kind of behind the schedule that Mike Pence set back in 2019, but is pretty on track. So it's pretty remarkable, I think, and it's been super fun to watch. Yeah,
I was just going to ask you to. Like saying you're getting into the next area for me, which is what is this mission actually trying to achieve? Like I heard that they set the record for being the furthest out from Earth. Presumably that wasn't the mission, to go as far out from Earth as they can. Like presumably there's something they're trying to discover or things they're trying to experiment with. Do you have any sense of what that is as a building block towards wherever they're going?
Yeah, so I think the building block was basically making sure that the Orion craft, which they're on, is survivable, that people can live on it and that it will keep them safe and that it will get them to a moon landing because the idea is to build this permanent base on the moon, like which is not an easy thing to do. Like you can't just get there and pitch a tent. Like so it's like pretty ambitious and NASA still has a pretty slim budget to contend with. But the idea was testing whether they could actually do this, whether they could get a crew there. And it seems to have ticked all of those boxes. But like scientifically, there's not really a point to it. Sure. Like, the astronauts were observing the moon out the windows, like with their naked eyes, like not hugely effective and can easily be done with unmanned crew. So it was intended by the Trump administration as a demonstration of dominance, that the United States will conquer space, that the United States is going to colonize the moon and get commercial gain from it. That was a big part of the initial Trump directives, that this is about commercial interests, particularly mining on the moon. But inadvertently, maybe I don't know if it's inadvertent or not, like NASA has, I think, kind of demonstrated that different version of America that we've been talking about, you know, that kind of idealism of working together and achieving something extraordinary. And I've got this quote here from a BBC piece about it, because I thought it was both true and also kind of pretty quaint, because it was talking about, you know, like scientifically is not kind of, there weren't huge achievements, but it finished this article with, perhaps its greatest achievement, though, is through the actions of the Artemis crew, which have generated hope, agency and optimism for a world appearing to be in desperate need of inspiration.
Fair enough. On the diversity thing, what I would say is that, like, I'm sure Pete Hegseth is gnashing his teeth, but leaving the other side, even if you're a person who's not really wild on diversity type stuff. I don't mean a racist. I mean a person who's like, you know, like I care about the content of their character rather than the colour of their skin, one of those kinds of people. Of all the pursuits, I think space is the one where you can most justify a focus on diversity, because you're representing the world. Mm-hmm. You're not representing a couple of people. You're not representing a country. You're representing the planet. And the idea that you're representing the planet with just white men would seem to me a little off. Like it's so I think it's pretty easy to justify, I have to say, even if you're a person who isn't usually big on ticking boxes and stuff. You just go, well, what are we doing here? This is mankind we're representing. Yeah. Hang on.
And it did genuinely seem to be like the best of the world in the way that, you know, the crew talk about each other, the way they demonstrated working together, the way they talked about grief, the way they did things like look back at the earth and say, like, you guys look great, we love you guys.
Not to mention as well, from a practical point of view, if you're going, this is just all symbolism, from a practical point of view, from a purely scientific, pragmatic point of view, they're moving towards a space base, right? Is the space base just going to have white men on it? No. So presumably they're going to be women on this space base.
I mean, maybe not if Elon has anything to do with it.
But Elon will at least want one woman on that space base. I feel sorry for that one woman.
So you can populate the planet single-handedly.
But presumably you need women. Presumably there will be other races on this space base. And so you need to know how they do in space. Because it might sound ridiculous. You go, well, of course they're going to do the same. Well, maybe they won't do the same, because like maybe biologically there is a difference between men and women in space. Let's see. Maybe biologically there is a difference between black and white people in space. Let's see. Yeah, so I actually think there's a lot of excellent reasons to focus on diversity in space. My next question is, I remember about 3-4 years ago when we were first talking about this new movement in space research, this new push. It was all about Elon going to Mars. It was all about Elon Musk personally stepping on Mars. That's what it was about. Now we're talking about the moon and the space base, which seems like a big step down from Elon Musk going to Mars. Right? When you first introduced the concept, you were saying this is on its way to Mars, but has anything changed? Have they slowed it down? Have they downgraded it? Have they, has there been an extra step inserted, or was this always the case and we were just focused on the wrong part?
I think the emphasis has changed, Chaz. So the emphasis initially, as you said, was all on Mars. Elon's focus was on Mars. Trump's focus was on Mars as well. I think reality has hit somewhat, that all of Elon's big promises about when he was going to get to Mars might have been made up, might have been a bit like Trump's 2 weeks. Yeah, sure. Elon has one as well. It's usually like 2 years or something. I'd have to go back and check. But Elon has a favourite time frame as well, and it's always bullshit. So I think there's been this kind of realisation, and so the focus has come back to the moon, that they're going to focus first on colonising the moon, still as a stepping stone to Mars. So so Trump actually called the astronauts while they were on Orion, and had a supremely awkward conversation with the four of them. But he mentioned Mars again, so it's still in his mind, like his idea of colonizing Mars is still very much present. He has this big thing about not just planting a flag or leaving footprints, but like we're actually going to go there. But I think it does seem like NASA is kind of using that desire as a vehicle to, focus on the moon first. Because again, like even building a permanent station on the moon in order to act as a launching pad, like that's going to take a while and a lot of money.
Do you approve of their vision? Are you happy about the full speed ahead on the moon base?
I mean, like if it was up to me.
Yeah, if it was up to you.
I think I would be much more like, I think the focus should be much more on like deep space exploration. Like I think we've kind of spent a lot of time studying the moon. Like we know just about all there is to know, and I don't really understand what would be achieved by spending more time there. Like I think there's a huge capitalist drive to get to the moon, which is kind of scary. But if it was up to me, I'd be sending like more voyages out to find those aliens that we want to visit us.
Can I make at least a semi case for the moon base to you and see if you find it convincing? Which is that my semi case is that if you want to do deep space exploration, if you want to do Mars exploration, if you want to do any exploration, a moon base is good for a couple of reasons. The first of which is there are no satellites buzzing around in front of you. They are like there's on Earth, and I can only imagine what it'll be like in 100 years' time trying to look out from the Earth with all how much space junk and shit's going to be in the way. Whereas the moon, you don't have those issues yet. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you are going to travel to, whether you're a drone or a robot or a person, and you're trying to travel to anywhere, most of your fuel is getting off the Earth, getting away from the gravity. That's not the problem on the moon. So if you have a big enough moon base to be able to launch future spaceships from there, then that will allow you to make much smaller spaceships, and that can go much faster as a result, and can make their fuel go a lot further. So I imagine that our ancestors, long after we're dead, in 150 years' time, 200 years' time, would much prefer to have a moon base to launch from than Earth. So that would be my two arguments for why a moon base is a good place to start. What do you reckon about that?
I'm convinced.
Thank you. Not to mention experiments about people. I know you're talking about it's going to be robots, but experiments about people in space are going to be a lot easier to conduct on the moon than on Earth, I would have thought. But, I imagine by the time any of this happens, we're all going to be, not we, but our descendants will be kind of the androids I've described many times on this podcast, which I'm obsessed with. There's a half people, half robot kind of descendants that we'll probably have. But they still need testing. Anyway, let's leave that. While this is happening, Trump is handing down a budget, which everyone's going to ignore, but still, a budget calling for a 23% cut to NASA's budget, including massive cuts in their science programs. How's that holding up while this is happening, do you think?
There has been a bit of noise about it. Yeah, look, I think the administration, at least, is just trying to funnel all the money into this, the colonization of space over NASA's scientific work. Because, of course, a lot of NASA's scientific work is Earth-based as well. Yeah. Like, a lot of it was climate science, which is being cut. So, I mean, I think the administrators of NASA, the NASA bureaucrats, are pretty clever at using these opportunities, using these big bits of attention in Congress as well. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of a fight about this in Congress while there's that political capital. But if they do get to keep budget, or they, if they get to hang on to some of it, it'll be for the big space stuff, for the big symbolic stuff.
I think this is going to help them retain whatever money they possibly can. I think this is a great PR move for them.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add about this topic or anything to do with space?
No, I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but I'll stop.
Oh, we do that on this podcast. We literally do talk for hours. So, okay, well, let's move on to, everyone's forgotten about this, even though it happened a week ago, and it was the biggest story in America a week ago, and that's Pam Bondi being sacked. So
I was about to say, I've got like no idea where this is going, what the biggest story could be.
Time didn't exist before the deadline tweets. So let's get into it. All right, now, what happened? Well, Trump apparently has been talking about sacking Bondi since January. So she probably knew it was coming. But apparently Trump told her in the car on the way to the Supreme Court the other day. And then she spent much of her last day making her case to stay in the cabinet, which is exactly the amount of dignity I would expect her to show after she was sacked. And then Trump tweeted out, Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend who faithfully served as my Attorney General over the past year. We love Pam, and she'll be transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. Isn't that nice? So look, he was nice to her. He was nice to her. That's a very pleasant
By Trump
tweet.
standards, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Not so nice that he offered her a token job like he did Christy Noam of the Special Envoy to the Shield of Americas. How's that going, Christy? Didn't even offer her an ambassadorship. So she's below Christy Noam in the pecking order, which I think that's got to hurt. That's really got to hurt. Anyway, you can tell how popular she was too, by the way, by this kind of thing leaking out the same day that she was sacked.
MS Now has new reporting that Bondi's portrait has already been taken down. And you see it there, thrown in the garbage.
So to be clear, Emma, not only did they choose to throw her portrait in the garbage, but they took a photo of her portrait in the garbage and then they leaked it to MS Now. Short of burning an effigy, I'm not quite sure her subordinates could have communicated more clearly their thoughts about Pam Bondi. Why she was sacked? Well, there are two main theories. Number one's Epstein. John Lovett from Pod Save America summed this theory up amusingly, I thought, with his tweet, "In a surprise twist, the Epstein files released the Attorney General." That was quite good. Bondi's problems began with this moment, I think. You won't remember this, but it was only 2 weeks after she started her job. It was right at the beginning.
And one of the things that you alluded to, and this is something Donald Trump has talked about, the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
Now, I played that grab along, Emma, because I want you to see the whole context of her answer so you can appreciate that her explanation in July was an obvious lie.
I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that.
No, you were asked about the client list in particular, and that's what you were answering the question on. But we see here the purest form of something that I think became the Bondi hallmark. And that is, rather than admit she made a mistake, and she made many mistakes, or at least say she was misunderstood, like she did in July anyway. If she was going to do that bullshit at some point in time, you might as well have done it back in February when it first looked like a problem. She tried to make up for her error by digging deeper. Don't admit fault, just dig deeper. So, back in February, she then contacted the most feverish social media influencers she could find who were obsessed with Epstein and her statement on Fox. And she called them into the White House, sucked up to them, and gave them binders labelled the Epstein Files Phase 1. Here we are looking at them there. Look at them. They're absolute doofuses. But it turns out that those binders just had stuff that had already been released to the public. It was a complete scam. And those influencers were not happy. They were so mad, which made things so much worse for Bondi. And then she dug deeper because that's what she does. And she claimed that DOJ would undertake a massive review of Epstein files to see if there was more that they could release. And in July, they released an unsigned memo that said, the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings related to Jeffrey Epstein, and they said this systemic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. And they released the full raw prison footage of the night Epstein was said to commit suicide, except there was at least a minute missing from the footage and all kinds of other issues. And Pam Bondi explained it here.
And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night.
Except that turned out to be a complete lie. And this once again made everything worse. And then they denied that there was absolutely no evidence to charge third parties. That was in that letter. And that was blatantly not true, because everyone could see Prince Andrew gallivanting around, and they could see the stories of Prince Andrew, and they go, well, that sounds like evidence to me. So that all led to the House Oversight Committee issuing a subpoena for the Epstein files, which Pam Bondi then dug deeper and resisted. And then that led to the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which led to millions of documents that people are still going through. And they have exposed Howard Lutnick as a liar. They've exposed allegations of sexual assault towards the president himself. And then some of that evidence got mysteriously disappeared. I wonder how that happened before that was exposed as well, which made people even angrier. And so on we go until we have a war in Iran. Every time Bondi tried to fix things, she made it worse. So I can kind of understand why Trump blames her, at least partly, for the story being kept in the news. Although if Trump wasn't completely allergic to transparency, she wouldn't feel the need to act like that. And I think that shouldn't be forgotten. Do you have any thoughts about this whole area with Bondi?
Really just that it was inevitable that she would go, hey, like she was in this impossible pincer position, you know, between the contradictions of Trump, who had promised a base that he would be transparent, that he would release the files. You know, there's a reason she's listing off the JFK files as well, because that was part of the transparency promise. That was part of dismantling the deep state. So she was trying to be loyal to that part of Trump while also being loyal to Trump more broadly. And there's no winning there. Of course, she was going to become the scapegoat. But also, like, how is it that she's so bad at lying?
I don't know.
Like, when she's had so much practice.
She really has. I thought practice made perfect. Yeah, no, she's not good at it. She's not good. Actually, that reminds me as well, just like as a performer, she seems, when you first see her, you think, oh, she's a pretty good performer, she's pretty slick. But then as soon as you see her start to lie, you go, well, you're really bad at this. And especially when she acts confected anger, when she tries to, like in those hearings, when she was trying to be, I'm all stroppy, I'm not going to put up with any of your back talk, thank you very much, trying to act tough, because she knows the only person who's watching this is Trump. And Trump wants to see her act tough. And so she tries to act tough, and it's just not convincing at all. In fact, I would argue, when in her hearing, the Epstein hearing, when she turned up with her book full of insults and topic changes, that was actually the thing that hurt her the most out of everything, even though that really didn't make any difference to stuff being released and, you know, rape allegations against Trump and all the rest of it. Like that, actually, that narrative, her hearing had nothing to do with. But her hearing embarrassed Trump, I think, because it embarrassed her so much. I mean, in particular, this is the classic moment, of course.
And
none of them ask Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about.
Let's talk about it. Last I heard it was about 46,500 actually. It's gone down. But let's leave that aside. I mean, that illustrates just what I was talking about. The gear change. Her going, you know why? Let me look at my notes. Oh yeah, the Dow. Like she's not speaking English. She's just throwing different phrases together. Sorry, what?
I reckon it's also that she was bad at performing the very specific gender role that MAGA assigns to women too.
Talk us through that. What's the role?
She's getting too close to being like an angry, screechy woman who's out of control. The MAGA woman needs to play this particular version of demure that can also be strong in the face of people who are regarded as lower in the hierarchy as you, but she's kind of yelling up in that sense and getting a bit screechy and getting out of control. And she also doesn't perform the look, like the MAGA woman look, in the same way that many in the Trump orbit do or did. Like Kristi Noem kind of embodies that, I think, that performance of a look and the visible work that goes into that look. So the changing of the hair, the plastic surgery, the lip stuff. Bondi didn't do that to the same extent, partly because she didn't kind of need to, like she already sort of fit the stereotype. But for Trump, it's the demonstration of the work that is part of the demonstration of loyalty. And so I think she failed implicitly on a number of fronts, and it became just too obvious in that congressional performance where she lost control. Like, she looked incompetent, she wasn't kind of calm and demure but strong. Like, Carolyn Leavitt plays that role, I think, really well.
She does.
And you can see Bondi trying to do that but failing dismally.
I was going to say, like, listening to you talking about, the role is to be demure and calm and not too screechy. Kristi Noem would have been listening to that, you saying that and going, bugger off, I was doing that. Yeah. What happened to me?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a demonstration as well that, like, with Trump, as always, like, loyalty only goes up. It doesn't come back down. It doesn't matter. Like, I say this about allies of the United States all the time. Like, it doesn't matter how much you give him. It's never enough. No. Like, it's never going to be enough to save you.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say that the other thing I'd add about that was, I mean, the reason Trump would have hated that so much is not only was it embarrassing, she was being laughed at. She was being openly laughed at in the hearing. Remember, that is Trump's psychological sore point, or sorest point. He's got a lot of sore points. His sorest point is he can't hack being laughed at. And the fact that she highlighted that they were laughing at her, what a dumb thing to do. You wouldn't have. We at home couldn't hear them laughing at you, Pam, but you highlighted it. So Trump was going, what? They're laughing at you. So I could see him just getting really annoyed about that. Anyway, so that's the Epstein stuff. She's got a deposition on April 14, by the way, about Epstein. I'm predicting I'm not at liberty to say you should ask Todd Blanche during that hearing. But anyway, so that's one theory. The other theory is that she can go after Trump's opponents hard enough. According to the New York Times, Trump has been particularly angry about the Justice Department's failure to win cases involving his political opponents, including against the former FBI Director James B. Comey and the New York Attorney General Letitia James. You can throw Adam Schiff into there as well. Adam Shifty Schiff in there as well. Now, Trump insisted on Lindsay Halligan being his vehicle for retribution. He insisted on her being installed as the top federal prosecutor in Virginia, which was a mistake because she was completely incompetent. And she made a heap of basic errors that would have doomed the case, even if she was eligible to be the lawyer prosecuting it. So that was where Trump stuffed up, insisting on her. But where Bondi stuffed up is she didn't insist on Halligan being appointed properly, which is her job. She's the Attorney General. She's supposed to be following how the law works, so that's her stuff up. Trump isn't supposed to know that shit. And eventually the case was thrown out because of that mistake. So that is a reason why Trump could legitimately blame her for those prosecutions screwing up. But I do emphasise they were going down anyway because Trump insisted on having someone incredibly incompetent trying to prosecute them. And also, none of those people broke the law. That's another reason those prosecutions were going down.
Yeah.
So it's a bit unfair, in my view, to blame her for a bunch of failed prosecutions when the cases are garbage and Trump is deluding himself that he thinks they're going to go anywhere. So, yeah, he's just a legal moron when it comes down to it. So that's all I have to say about that. Do you have anything to say about the going after the opponents bit with Bondi?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right that he was clearly frustrated that she wasn't effectively weaponizing the department the way that he wanted her to.
Okay. All right. So now, that's why she went, between those two reasons, or maybe both of them. That people tend to say more the second than the first, but yeah, whatever. I don't know. I don't know the inside word. What I'd like to focus on is why Bondi was so terrible. Because I think a lot of people agree that she is one of the all-time worst. But the question is, why was she so bad? So do you want to give us your thoughts first? Because I'm sure your thoughts will overlap with mine. So do you have any thoughts about things that leap out at you, about things that you think Bondi was particularly bad at, or would you like me to start? It's up to you.
I don't think I have much more to say other than that, like, it is astounding that she's such a bad liar. Like, I don't know how that happens. Yeah. But it's part of a Trump pattern, isn't it? Like, he picks people not on the basis of their qualifications or their ability to execute, like, what he needs them to execute. He picks them because he likes the way they look on TV.
And they're loyal.
Like, that's... Yeah, exactly. And their loyalty. That's why Hegseth is where he is, because Trump thought he was good on Fox News.
Yeah, good looking in his lawyer.
And so they all, Hegseth will probably more than likely meet the same kind of fate eventually for that same reason. But no, you go ahead. Yeah, no,
that's okay. I was going to say that it's funny how we've gotten to where we're, the way this administration works, you go, well, the top qualification is how good are they at lying? I can't believe you picked that person when they're such a bad liar. Like in the ideal world, our Attorney General wouldn't need to be a great liar. But anyway, okay, let me go through my list on why she was so terrible. And note that a lot of the things on my list that were awful about Bondi were things that she was requested to be by Trump. So you can expect her successor to be similarly awful. When Bondi spoke at her confirmation hearing, this is what she said.
If confirmed as the next Attorney General of the United States, my overriding objective will be to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously prosecuting criminals. And that includes getting back to basics: gangs, drugs, terrorists, cartels, our border, and our foreign adversaries. That is what the American people expect, and that is what they deserve from the Department of Justice.
Maybe that's what they expect and they deserve, but what they got was a Department of Justice obsessed with partisanship and immigration. According to ProPublica, the DOJ closed around 23,000 criminal cases in the first 6 months of Donald Trump's term, which involved investigations into terrorism, white-collar crimes, and drugs. Almost all of those cases they didn't even attempt to prosecute. A number of those cases involved years of investigations. In that same first 6 months of Trump's second term, there were 45% more drug cases dropped than the average of the previous 3 administrations. There were 59% more white-collar crime cases dropped than the average in the previous 3 administrations, including Trump's first administration. There were 26% more violent crime cases dropped than the average of the previous three administrations. Bear in mind, he loves talking about getting violent crime. Mm-hmm. And 93% more national security cases dropped than the average of the previous three administrations. Meanwhile, they prosecuted 32,000 new immigration cases. That was a 15% increase on Trump's first term during the same period. And they declined immigration cases at a rate 22% smaller than the average, lower than the average of the previous three administrations. Now, what's going on here is just resource management, yeah? Forget terrorism, forget white-collar crime, forget drugs. We have nannies and fruit pickers to deport. Let's focus on that. And that is what the Department of Justice was about.
Yeah.
She basically ended all prosecution of political corruption. There was almost none of it under her.
I wonder why.
Yeah, how about that? I mean, obviously it started with her dismissing a slam dunk corruption case against Eric Adams, which you may or may not remember. Why? Because they wanted to help out on immigration enforcement. That's why. Everything's about immigration. It was so obviously completely inappropriate that a bunch of Department of Justice's best prosecutors resigned rather than take part in that decision. And she made no effort whatsoever to pretend that the Department of Justice was not actually Trump's law firm. There's another reason that she was awful. On her first day in the job, she said this to the Department of Justice.
We are so proud to work at the directive of Donald Trump. It is, he will never stop fighting for us, and we will never stop fighting for him and for our country.
And then a month later, they hung a massive banner of Trump's face outside the Department of Justice, like his big brother or something. Not the TV show, the book. So 1984, the book, sorry. So embarrassing. Look, I'm not surprised she was partisan. Not only was she Trump's impeachment lawyer, but she actually took part in lock her up chants in the 2016 election campaign against Hillary Clinton. I get that. That's the future Attorney General, by the way, chanting lock her up. But on her first day in office, she issued a memo called General Policy Regarding Zealous Advocacy on Behalf of the United States. I'm going to read you a fair chunk of this because this stuff is history as far as I'm concerned. It is the job of an attorney privileged to serve in the Department of Justice to zealously defend the interests of the United States. Those interests and the overall policy of the United States are set by the nation's chief executive. When Department of Justice attorneys, for example, refuse to advance good faith arguments by declining to appear in court or sign briefs, it undermines the constitutional order and deprives the president of the benefit of his lawyers. They're not his lawyers. So it's therefore the policy of the Department of Justice that any attorney who, because of their personal political views or judgments, declines to sign a brief or appear in court, refuses to advance good faith arguments on behalf of the administration, or otherwise delays or impedes the department's mission, will be subject to discipline and potentially termination consistent with applicable law. To me, that alone, that memo, that sole memo, deserved impeachment. That explicitly demanded Department of Justice attorneys ignore the rule of law and their oath of office or fairness to just do whatever Trump wanted. That's what that memo said. She literally called them his lawyers. And the results of this is a lot of Department of Justice attorneys just said, no, I'm not doing this. As of January 2026, more than 2,500 lawyers out of the 10,000 they started with, have retired or left the DOJ in 12 months. 261 others were fired or transferred. That's obviously the bulk of those with integrity walked out the door. They're in that 2,500. Obviously a huge brain drain as well of competence and integrity. And that compromises the DOJ's ability to do anything. Part of the reason she's so incompetent is because all the competent people who would advise her are gone. So that's part of the problem there. It doesn't affect her ability to lie, though, I must say. She also, right from the beginning, rooted out opponents of Trump. She said she would root out prosecutors who hated Donald Trump. That was her quote. She openly admitted that. She purged not just people who worked on Jack Smith's team or the investigation in January 6th, but even people who barely had anything to do with them. People who just vaguely related. People who are just following orders. She's got rid of a lot of them. She launched countless actions and probes into Trump's ridiculous allegations of electoral fraud from 2020, including another probe just last week. And she made some appalling calls in order to advance Trump's whims. Like for instance, this is her respect for free speech right here. She threatened to prosecute an Office Depot employee for refusing to print flyers for a Charlie Kirk memorial vigil. That's her dedication to free speech right there. She wants to find domestic terrorists as having, quote, extreme viewpoints on immigration, radical gender ideology, and anti-American sentiment. She's talking about people who just have a different political view. And not only did she brazenly pursue Trump's political opponents over complete non-charges, like they just would rubbish charges, but when grand juries rejected those charges, which never happens, by the way, it's unheard of for a grand jury to reject a charge, she'd then try them again anyway, and then the grand jury reject them again, which is what happened with Letitia James. She couldn't have sucked up to Trump any harder as well. This is my favourite sucking up moment I play all the time.
Since you have been in office, President Trump, your DOJ agencies have seized more than 22 million fentanyl pills, 3,400 kilos of fentanyl since you've been your last 100 days, which saved, are you ready for this, media? 258 million lives.
Oh my God. I just can't believe that clip.
And it's funny though, because going back to like her performance, the tone she's using there is the same tone she's using to berate members of Congress. Yeah. Like she doesn't have she's performing loyalty, but she's got no warmth in her voice when she's saying it to the president. And so I think obviously she was terrible, exactly as you've just described, Chaz, but it's the failure of the performance that has let her down, I think, in terms of Trump, like why Trump's let her go.
I think you're right. I think this whole list I'm giving are all irrelevant. And that the one that counts is the fact
That's not what I meant.
No, you're right. I mean, to her sacking. They're all relevant to her sacking. There are reasons I'd sack her, but they're not reasons why Trump sacked her. Trump sacked her because she doesn't perform what he wants well. You're right. Absolutely. She also oversaw a DOJ with zero integrity, I might add, as well. There's been so much misconduct and blatant lying to judges in the Department of Justice under her watch, obviously encouraged by her, that judges are no longer giving the Department of Justice the presumption of regularity, which means the courts are no longer assuming the Department of Justice lawyers are acting in good faith or that they'll take them at their word. That's never happened before, to my knowledge. That's historic. Yeah. And all those things I've just told you up to now are things that are going to apply to the next one as well. Like they're all things
worse, probably.
Yeah, because they'll probably be more competent. Like if they're Todd Blanche, they'll be more competent. So that is that's all what Trump wants. But also, we should add, she was incredibly incompetent. During the Minnesota operation this year, Bondi sent so few Department of Justice resources to Minnesota, they couldn't handle the court orders and prosecutions from the operation. So they ended up letting go and dropping the charges against almost everyone they arrested because they couldn't service them. So they're just arresting people and then just letting them go because they didn't have the prosecutors. It was extraordinarily incompetent. And her DOJ wrote a letter pushing the Texas gerrymander a few months back. The Republican judge described as challenging to unpack because it contains so many factual, legal, and typographical errors. And it was so badly written, it almost got the gerrymander thrown out in court by a Republican judge. It was incredible. And the final thing that made her so shit, this is not shit, this is just a little side. She did weird stuff. She sold her own branded merch at the Department of Justice gift shop.
No.
Yes, she did. Water bottles with Pam Bondi's face on it. That's new. No other Attorney General's done that before. She created award categories at the official Attorney General Awards for dogs. Awards for dogs, for being good boys. Now, look, I approve of good boys. You know that.
Trump doesn't like dogs.
No, I know. He wouldn't. Maybe that's why she got sacked. The fact is, even if you love dogs, that's weird to be handing out awards on Justice Night to dogs. But anyway, do you have anything else to add about her being? I think I've been pretty exhaustive there, but you might have more or anything you want to comment on.
No, I didn't. I mean, I just didn't know about the merch stuff. Like, maybe that was the killing blow.
Maybe.
Like, Trump, that's unforgivable in Trump's eyes.
Maybe she didn't give him a slice. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem was there weren't water bottles with Trump's picture on them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem. Anyway, what this means going forward is, like I said before, the next Attorney General is going to be just as bad, whoever it is. And there's no better illustration of this than the attempted DM that Trump buggered up to Bondi in September last year. This one here. Pam, I've reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old stories last time, all talk, no action, nothing's been done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing's going to be done. Then we almost put in a Democrat supported a US attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke rhino who was never going to do his job. That's why two of the worst Dem senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit and that we had no case. No, I fired him. And there was a great case. And many lawyers and legal pundits say so. Lindsay Halligan's a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and they indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now, President DJT. So in summary, he's basically ordering her to prosecute people who had such weak cases against them that a grand jury eventually rejected those charges. Once again, I can't emphasize enough how weak that case is if a grand jury rejects it. And he was doing that. He was ordering her to prosecute, which he's not meant to do, because he wanted to get those people. And he openly said it was because he wanted revenge for being impeached himself, for things he actually did, and charges that were laid for things he actually did. And he was having a go at the US attorney who told him that the cases he wanted prosecuted were rubbish, and they were. Instead, he advanced Lindsay Halligan, someone who he called a really good lawyer, who only didn't go to jail because the judge gave her the benefit of the doubt that she was too incompetent and stupid to have meant to have broken the law. That's the person. That's Trump said was a really good lawyer. But most importantly, the main reason he was pushing her was because he was taking the advice of random losers and clout chasers on Truth Social, many of whom may not have even been Americans. They are the tail wagging the dog. And that is what the next Attorney General is going to be facing. Those same losers telling Trump what to do and then Trump telling the next Attorney General what to do. Got thoughts?
I mean, he is just the worst, like, comic book villain boss you can ever imagine, with more power than anyone else. Like, imagine dealing with that man. But you're right. Like, the person who comes after is going to learn all those lessons and probably do a better job at what Trump wants, at weaponizing the department, at ignoring, all of those frameworks and laws that you were talking about even more effectively.
I played this clip on Play America and people are going to think, oh, that's not really a wowing clip. It's not amazing. It's not stupid. It's not a slam dunk. But to me, this clip's really important because what it is Chip Roy on, I think, Newsmax saying what he's looking for. Chip Roy's a conservative. And by the way, one of the more reasonable conservatives in the House. Like, as far as those MAGA conservatives go, he's possibly the most reasonable. And he's saying what he's looking for in the next Attorney General. I want to play you this clip and then we'll talk about it.
We've got to deal with things like Antifa. The president rightly declared them a terrorist organization. We want to see people who are affiliated with these Marxist networks funding Antifa, creating all sorts of danger for the American people. We want them held accountable. We want the people who are harassing J6ers held accountable. We want to know the truth on Arctic Frost. My records were targeted under Arctic Frost, Jack Smith. We want to see heads roll. Okay. We want to see John Brennan, who the Judiciary Committee referred to the Department of Justice, held accountable, and Jim Comey. Like, these are all things that we think need to happen.
So let's go through that list. He wants someone to go after Antifa. By that he means left-wing protesters. He wants someone to go after the prosecutors of January 6 rioters. He wants someone to go after Arctic Frost. That's the investigation into January 6. He wants to investigate the investigators. Yeah. He wants someone to go after Jack Smith. He wants someone to go after Jim Comey. He wants someone to go after John Brennan, who are all just Joe Biden staffers. Basically, he's looking for someone to jail Democratic bogeymen from 5 years ago. That's what he wants. He didn't mention going after violent criminals. He didn't mention going after corrupt people. He didn't even mention the border, for Christ's sake. You think Republicans would at least mention that. He didn't talk about enforcing the law fairly. He didn't even mention Jeffrey Epstein. He openly advocated purely for a partisan hatchet man, and that is it. And he is the most reasonable of that group of people. That is what they want. It's going to get worse. Especially if they pick someone who's more competent than Pam Bondi. And the person they have there right now as the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, is more competent than Pam Bondi. So if they just keep him, it's going to get worse. It's interesting, though, this does lead to a massive issue for confirmation because Tom Tillis has the balance of power, as we've described a number of times on this podcast, on the Judiciary Committee. He has explicitly said he will not support any nominee who justified any element of January 6. He's already acted on that. He destroyed Ed Martin, Eagle Ed Martin Jr.'s nomination for US Attorney for DC because he was investigating January 6 investigators. So can they find someone that Trump and Republicans want, but who Tom Tillis also will accept? I don't know if they can, but that's going to be an interesting situation. I think Todd Blanche is the only one, actually. Todd Blanche has not said anything negative about January 6. So I think that it may have to be Todd Blanche. I don't think it can be the others. So it comes to a correspondence. Do you have anything to add at this point in time? We got correspondence here from Lost Stack. Hey! Chaz, given Pam Bondi's sacking and the rumours of further to come, what's the likelihood that Todd Blanche will be confirmed? Trump could really regret firing cabinet secretaries if they can't confirm replacements within 120 days. Well, first of all, Todd Blanche is the confirmed Deputy Attorney General anyway, so even if the 120 days elapses, he can still keep on being an effective Deputy Attorney General, even if he isn't the acting Attorney General, so he can still run the place from the deputyship. It wouldn't be the first time Trump's operated without an important person in the position. The CDC hasn't had a director for weeks, any kind of director, acting or official. But I think Blanche is going to get confirmed pretty easily. He'll get past Tom Tillis. He's MAGA enough for Republicans, and he's a real lawyer for moderates. Like, he's actually a lawyer, as opposed to most of the people being put up, like Janine Pirro. And the moderate Democrats would be grateful to vote for him out of fear that the next one off the rank is Janine Pirro. So I think he's going to get up. But anyway, do you have any final thoughts on anything to do with Pam Bondi? I know I've kind of taken this because this is kind of my area, the Department of Justice. But do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you nailed it, Chad.
Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left before you go. Then we've got a bit of white flash work. But let's start a topic which I'm going to have to finish off afterwards because, when we talk to the Supreme Court, I've always got lots to say. But let's start to the Birthright Citizenship case at the Supreme Court, which yet again happened last week. It was huge, and now everyone's forgotten it ever existed. But let's get into it. Basically, all I need to do to set this up and then just let you go is tell you the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which is all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. People have forever interpreted that to mean if you're born in America, you're an American citizen. There are some people who hate that because they want to cut down on illegal immigration, and they believe a lot of illegal immigrants come here to have what they call anchor babies. They have a baby in America who's an American citizen, and that then, first of all, that entitles them to welfare payments through their kids. And they're all bludgers, they want a welfare. And secondly, although I should explain, bludgers means, because Jared hadn't heard the word bludgers. If you're American listening to this, a welfare bludger is someone who's unfairly, lazily taking welfare instead of working, etc. Because, those immigrants, they never work. Anyway, they're the only ones who work. Anyway, and secondly, when that kid is an adult, they can then sponsor their family becoming legal residents or citizens as well. And they're playing the long game, and the Dems love this because it gradually increases their voters over time, even though second generations of migrants tend to vote more Republican anyway. But let's leave that aside. Don't worry about it. It's all a conspiracy. All right, so that's a setup. Take it from there.
So you're right to say that for really since the 14th Amendment was ratified, this has been the accepted definition of the amendment. It is the clause itself that we're talking about, that Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, is really clear, like unusually so for the US Constitution, right? But Trump had said, he said during his first term and then again in his campaign that he was going to undo birthright citizenship for all the gross racist reasons that you just outlined. So first day of his presidency, he signs this executive order that basically seeks to end the 14th Amendment by quite specifically excluding the children of undocumented immigrants, and reflective of this kind of long obsession with anchor babies.
And not just them, everyone who's not a lawful permanent resident. Yeah. Okay, so that's not just illegal immigrants. That's also tourists. That's people on student visas. That's people on work visas. Anyone who doesn't have a green card. If you have a green card and you have a kid, they're Americans. But if you don't have a green card and you have a kid, they're who knows, but they're not Americans. Not necessarily. They can apply to be Americans down the road, but not necessarily. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which is would be a radical overhaul of what America is and what the Constitution stands for. It would be a real remaking, Project 2025 style of American society into one that would create basically a stateless subclass of people and change citizenship into a right of people to a privilege that is bestowed by the ruling classes. So a radically different society, which is the entire aim of this executive order. So not unsurprisingly, this is, like most of Trump's executive orders, is immediately challenged by the ACLU and others. The executive order is blocked by federal courts. The administration appeals that, and we've made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. I'm not a SCOTUS nerd like you just.
I am. It's okay. I'll take care of that.
Great. So I'm still like a little bit confused about how this all kind of plays out, because on the 27th of June, must have been last year, the Supreme Court rules that individual judges in federal courts lack the authority to issue nationwide injunctions blocking federal policies. So then you potentially have this total mess where there are injunctions against the executive order in some states and not in others, and it's states that issue birth certificates. So it's just this whole big mess again. Lots of confusions. And it was, at the time, as if I recall correctly, it was kind of framed as the Supreme Court kind of skirting around dealing with the substantive issues, not wanting to stand up to Trump directly, but not wanting to make a decision about the 14th Amendment because of how kind of the potential for this radical overhaul that we were talking about. Anyway, it gets to the Supreme Court. And on the 1st of April, so what is that, last week?
That's 8 days ago. It's 8 days ago. Feels like about 3 months ago.
Yeah. Wild. There's final oral arguments in this court, which is Trump v. Barbara, sorry. Yeah. And this is when the president went to hear the oral arguments in person. The first sitting president to ever do that. He lasted a whole 13 minutes sitting in court, and was clearly there to pressure or attempt to pressure and bully the judges into deciding in his favour. Like, you know, how he likes to sit there and do the face, the stern bully face, and remind those judges who's in charge and who put them there.
Having listened to the oral arguments, I didn't see it because it's not videotaped, but having listened to it, you can't hear that. I mean, as in, obviously Trump didn't say anything, but they don't sound intimidated to me. I tell you,
they didn't.
Who did sound intimidated was John Sauer, the Solicitor General, who was even more fidgety and nervous and hyperactive than he normally is. I think he was feeling the pressure, but the judges, I don't think they gave us stuff.
No, they didn't. They didn't. Doesn't seem to have worked. And the ACLU's lawyer, whose name escapes me,
Cecilia Wong, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Was also not intimidated and was very effective, and it seems has understood the kind of, I guess, legal ideological position of many of the judges on the court, including people like Alito, who describe themselves as originalists. Because if you take the originalist interpretation of the amendment, it's very clear what it means, and there has been, however many, over a century of consensus about what this clause means. And it seems like that argument has been pretty effective in convincing those judges and exposing that kind of ideological divide between genuine conservatives and originalists and the Trump kind of interpretation of the Constitution, which is it means whatever the fuck I want it to mean.
Yeah. I was going to say, first of all, Cecilia Wang, not Wong, but also, it was hilarious. I agree completely with your analysis there that you, like, normally what you associate, like the cliches of the Supreme Court are that the originalists are often the conservative appointed justices who are all concerned about the black letter law and tradition and history, and they don't care about the consequences, assuming that suits the Republican side. Whereas the Democrat appointed judges are always consequentialists. They're talking about, well, won't this have this effect, and that effect will hurt that people, and that. No, the originalists say you're meant to just call balls and strikes based on the letter of the law. And what we had here was the direct opposite. All the Democrat appointed justices were going, well, hang on. There's this Supreme Court case from 1898, which is pretty clear. There's a really obvious constitutional amendment, and there's like 2 different statutes that just completely rule you out from 940 and 952. And as you say, there's 150 years of people understanding this only one way, and you're saying they're all wrong. And John Sauer gets up there, and Alito did a bit of this as well, and they're talking about birth tourism and stuff. They're talking about consequences. They're not talking about the law at all. They're talking about, well, we need to get rid of this because it's a new world. And I'm like, I don't want to jump ahead, but I am going to play a bit where John Roberts, was the ultimate slapdown, said, new world, same constitution. So it was there. They reversed their roles. It was hilarious.
It's been pretty embarrassing, and the consensus seems to be that it's heading for a unanimous decision against, like, basically cutting down the executive order, which would be a huge defeat for Trump, who appointed who was supposed to hand this movement the Supreme Court and get all these decisions in his favor. So that would be I think he's going to be pretty angry if that happens.
I think he is. Yes. I'd be shocked if Alito voted against him. I think he's got 1 vote at least. I mean, maybe even 2. But he's definitely not winning this one, I'll tell you that. Like, I'm going to go through some of the legal ins and outs, and Gorsuch and Barrett and Roberts, they weren't giving much time to this. So he's going down. There's no doubt about that. Do you have any other thoughts about the issue or about the arguments or anything to do with it at all?
Yeah. I think just the kind of the historical context is like what I find most kind of interesting, because basically, like, what the executive order is doing is attempting to take the United States back to like a pre-14th Amendment world. It's trying to take the United States back to the world of Dred Scott, which is a Supreme Court decision of 1857 that enslaved peoples could not be considered citizens of the United States and therefore couldn't have federal protection. Basically argued that, like, black people could never be citizens of the United States. And the 14th Amendment was expressly a repudiation of that decision. that's how it was framed. And part of what the Trump side of this has tried to do is argue that the 14th Amendment, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, was only meant to apply to the children of enslaved people, that it had that narrow purpose. Now, it clearly doesn't. Like we've said already, that the clause is really clear and really expansive. But even if you took that argument, the executive order that Trump wrote would strip those rights from the children of enslaved people. So it's so Trumpian in that the whole argument contradicts and undermines itself, but they don't care. Like in their mission to radically remake the United States or return the United States to this Dred Scott era, while simultaneously like trying to memory hole slavery entirely, is such a window on like how deeply radical this project, the movement that drives Trump is, and how radically it wants to reshape the United States. And I don't think it will succeed in this particular court case, but they're not going to stop with that. And they will get, as we just discussed, they will get angrier and angrier. And Trump is going to keep, as he faces defeat and humiliation, potentially in this Supreme Court decision, potentially through Iran, he's going to feel more and more cornered. And I don't think that leads us anywhere good.
I think you're right. All I would add before we get to the white flash is I do have a slightly it's a very nuanced point to make, probably too nuanced. People are going to go, why'd you stop down to say this? I've got a slightly different take on what they're trying to do, in that I think this is a fundamental difference in the way different people approach their take on the Trump administration, in that I don't think they're trying to return it back to Dred Scott. I think they're trying to get rid of immigrants, and they don't care how they do it. I think basically what Trump is. I think like there is a kind of person like on the non-Trump side who thinks of Project 2025 and stuff like that. They have a vision for this Handmaid's Tale type future, or where religious supremacy and all this kind of stuff. And some people do. Some people absolutely do. And some people in his administration do. But I don't think Trump does. I think Trump doesn't have any vision at all. I think Trump has different things that the drunk guy at the end of the pub wants to happen. And he doesn't give a shit about whether they're consistent with each other, or what the rule of law has to say, or what any ideology of any kind or any vision how that fits into any of that. He just has bits and pieces like a bowerbird he's picked up over 50 years and goes, I like that. I like taking the oil. I don't like immigrants. I like the death penalty. I like these things. And I want them to happen. Damn it. I'm the president. Make them happen. Yeah. And then he has these little people run around and Steve Miller yells at them, and they just do whatever they can to make them happen. They don't care what other corollaries occur along the way. They just have to make it happen within the rule of law. And the way you get rid of immigrants within the rule of law is to get rid of birthright citizenship. That's the way you do it. So they'll get rid of that. They don't care about the Dred Scott or whatever. Trump hasn't heard of Dred Scott. They just want to get rid of immigrants. The net result is you end up with this in the same place, which is why I said it's a very nuanced point to make. But I think what's going on in his head is in a way worse than someone who has a vision that you disagree with or that you're scared of. It's a person with no vision at all. And you can end up anywhere when you have no vision at all. And so that's so in a way my take on what's going on with Trump is bleaker than he has a malign view. I think he has no view. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's the way I see him, and I know lots of other people see him the way that you just described. And
I mean, I think maybe I should have been more specific, Chaz, because I think you're right. Like, I totally agree with you about Trump's approach and Trump's like incoherent worldview. I think that's a really nice way of putting it. But like you mentioned Stephen Miller there and Project 2025, all of those people have a very coherent
very much
vision, ideological vision. And they are the people that swept Trump to power. And while they're responding to him, they also have their own agenda that they're pursuing. And as long as they don't draw too much attention for him, as long as they don't do a Bondi, they can continue pursuing that agenda. And Miller is very much, Miller and all of them are very much doing that. And they do, I think they do have a sense of American history and a particular version of the United States pre or around Dred Scott that they are trying to implement. And they're very good at using the kind of Trump movement and Trump's bowerbird approach to affect that agenda. And they'll hit roadblocks every now and again, with SCOTUS, but that's the overarching aim. And I think as long as that suits Trump, they're running in parallel.
I 100% agree. That's a wonderful note to go out on, this beautiful harmony. Dr. Emma, thank you so much for your time. After the white flash, folks, I will get all legal on the Birthright citizenship case and a couple other things as well. And I'll see the rest of you in a week's time when Dave's returns. And until then, thank you so much, Dr. Emma Shortis. You were wonderful.
It's my absolute pleasure, Chaz. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Peppers.
Till next time, stay peppy. Welcome to the other side of the white flash. This is Chaz Unleashed.
With Lockie.
That's the one.
I also love space. Emma, that was an awesome segment on Artemis. Thank you for bringing that to the pod.
Well said. Now let's get into the birthright citizenship legal side. Mm-hmm. I did read you the 14th Amendment. I'm going to do it again. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So there's two parts there. Born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Let's look at subject to the jurisdiction thereof, because that phrase is what anti-immigration people tend to focus on.
Okay.
They say that illegal immigrants are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because they owe their allegiance to another country. That's what they say.
Okay.
So therefore, their children should not be covered by the 14th Amendment. Generally speaking, people consider subject to the jurisdiction of to mean if they're bound by its laws. Mm-hmm. That's generally how they interpret it. There are only a few exceptions for people in America who are considered subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. One is foreign ambassadors and foreign ministers, who have, if you've watched Lethal Weapon 2, diplomatic immunity. Great accent, Chaz. Well done. That's me doing an impression of a very bad South African accent in Lethal Weapon 2. So their children, foreign ambassadors, since they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, they're not considered to be United States citizens. The second exception is invading armies. If there's people who are coming to invade America, they're not following the laws of America. They're not subject to the jurisdiction of the American government. If they have children in America, they're not considered American citizens. They all sound quite reasonable, don't they?
Pretty good.
There was a third exception back when the 14th Amendment was passed, and it was explicit. It was the citizens of Native American tribes who were born on tribal lands. And the reason for that was not just because they were just being racist. It was because that the Native American lands were considered separate nations from the United States. That's why they call them the nation of this, the nation of that, the Cherokee Nation, etc. But in 1924, Congress patched that up and they all became citizens as well. Okay, so that's now gone, the Native American exception. Yes. But the other two exceptions still apply, as far as people generally think. Now, the problem for people looking to increase those exceptions to include illegal immigrants is that there is a long history and tradition of the definition of subject to the jurisdiction of in America, meaning what I just said. For instance, in 1812, geez, we're going back. In 1812 in the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Marshall, the granddaddy of the Chief Justices, wrote in Schooner Exchange v. McFadden, when private individuals of one nation spread themselves through another as business or caprice may direct, mingling indiscriminately with the inhabitants of the other, it would be obviously inconvenient and dangerous to society and would subject the laws to continual infraction and the government to degradation if such individuals or merchants did not owe temporary and local allegiance and were not amenable to the jurisdiction of the country. So even there, he's saying, back in 1812, they're saying if you mix and you come over, then you're subject to the jurisdiction of the country. So that's a long time. It's 200 years they've been using that definition of subject to the jurisdiction of. Also, when the 14th Amendment passed in the 1860s, there were a lot of debates about it. A lot of debates in Congress about this, right? From pro and anti people. And they're all saying the same thing. They all understood it to mean the same thing, which is how we interpret it now.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed. They all knew what it meant, and it meant that all immigrants were covered by it. There were racists in Congress saying, you can't do this because then gypsies are going to be American citizens, their children. Like, they were just saying all the shit that you expect racists to say. And they're saying, therefore, we shouldn't have the 14th Amendment. And they lost. They all understood what it meant. There was no confusion. Now, to be fair, there was no sense of illegal immigration then, just immigration. They didn't have immigration laws at that point in time. So there was no illegal immigrants. But the concept was clear. The understanding was clear. If you turn up and you live in America, your children become citizens. Finally, it would make no logical sense to expand the definition that way because it would mean that illegal immigrants aren't bound by America's laws.
That's going to cause problems.
Yes. Yes. They can go rob a bank if they want and the police can't do anything.
Oh,
like they can just do whatever they like the dudes in Lethal Weapon 2. And what's more, you can't deport them. They don't answer to you. They can just do whatever the hell they want. Now, obviously, you can physically deport them, but just the operation of the law, they would be utterly lawless. These people, the operation of the law would be very, very different.
Unlike ICE, who always have operated within the confines of the law.
Exactly. So anyway, that's just subject to jurisdiction talk. Enter the Supreme Court case I referred to before, which is Wong Kim Ark. If all this I've just said wasn't clear enough, it became crystal clear in US versus Wong Kim Ark in 1898, where at this point in time, illegal immigration was a thing. It already existed now. The Chinese Exclusion Act had been passed, and they were trying to get rid of Ark because they said he was Chinese and he wasn't a US citizen. So they were like, a whole bunch of dudes didn't like Chinese people back then. They're like, get him out of here. And he said, you can't do that. I'm American because I was born in America, even though my parents were what we would now call illegal immigrants. I was born in America, so you can't get rid of me. And the Supreme Court held, even though he was born to two parents who were citizens of China, they were both citizens of China, since he was born in America, birthright citizenship applied to him, and so under the 14th Amendment, he was a US citizen, and those judges were super racist, but they still ruled that way because they could speak English. Enter Donald Trump, who feels that everyone's got this issue wrong for 150 years. He signed an executive order that we described. I've already told you about what that means. I'm not going to go through it again. What I'm going to go through, though, is his logic, because I didn't mention that before. He made no attempt to make a legal argument, by the way. He just said, they're wrong. And these are my reasons. He's got two reasons, which he says endlessly on Truth Social. One is a Truth Social tweet. Birthright citizenship has to do with the babies of slaves, not Chinese billionaires who have 56 kids, all of whom become American citizens. One of many great scams of our time, President Donald J. Trump. It is ironic that Trump is worried about the kids of Chinese billionaires cheapening citizenship when he is the one who is selling citizenship for $1 million a pop with his gold card. That's something he came up with. All right. He just thinks they're not paying enough for their citizenship. But that's his first argument. He uses that a lot. It's about birth tourism. And we've got to stop birth tourism. This is about slaves. It's supposed to be about slaves. That's what Emma described before accurately. That's what he says.
And the second
argument is, we are the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship.
And
that's not tweet.
Is that true?
Not even close. Here is a map of the world. The 40 countries in brown have restricted birthright citizenship. That includes Australia. Restricted birthright citizenship means that some people born in the country automatically become citizens. Others have to go through various hoops. So it's half and half. The ones in orange that you can see, the 35 countries, Donald, in orange have unrestricted birthright citizenship, like America, where everyone born in the country becomes a citizen. One of them is Canada. Basically, the Americas have unrestricted birthright citizenship. Yep. North and South America, all of them, except for, I think it's Colombia maybe. There's like one country. It's the only one that has some kind of restrictions. If you removed birthright citizenship, by the way, like Trump wants, it would discourage illegal immigration. He's right. But there would be about 200,000 babies born a year left in limbo, potentially creating a massive permanent underclass in America. That's the policy reason against this. These are the scenarios that create real racial strife in places like France, where you have millions of people who aren't citizens of France, who are living in France.
Wow.
And they're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to do all kinds of stuff, right? And so they just end up being this underclass and they riot and it's not good. And one of the reasons why America is one of the best countries in the world for assimilation of migrants is because they're not like that. And this would screw that right up. Not that Stephen Miller cares because he just wants to get rid of them. But anyway, that's all policy. Let's get to the court case. Barbara versus Trump, like Emma said. The argument that Solicitor General John Sauer ran was quite odd. Even though Wong Kim Ark appears to settle the issue, he said actually it agrees with Trump. And this is how. He was asking not to overrule Wong Kim Ark. He said, no, Wong Kim Ark's right. I'm not asking you to overrule it. Just everyone's misunderstood it until now. Trump was the one who discovered that everyone misunderstood it. Let's listen to what he has to say. He says it revolves around the word domicile, which was used 20 times in Wong Kim Ark. Here we go.
Senator Trumbull explained that subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and the clause means not owing allegiance to anybody else. And in 1884, this court recognized that subject to the jurisdiction means owing direct and immediate allegiance. The clause thus does not extend citizenship to the children of temporary visa holders or illegal aliens. Unlike the newly freed slaves, those visitors lack direct and immediate allegiance to the United States. For aliens, lawful domicile is the status that creates the requisite allegiance, and the text of the clause presupposes domicile.
Yep, he's had some long nights in nightclubs, has John Sauer, if you're wondering about that voice. The phrase subject to the jurisdiction of means you have allegiance to America, he says. And that is established through domicile, he says. Where did he pull that from? Well, according to Wong Kim Ark, Wong was born in San Francisco to Chinese nationals who were, at the time of his birth, domiciled residents in the United States. That's what they say in the case. Domiciled residents in the United States. He considered that to be like lawful permanent residence, which is coincidentally the definition that Trump is using today for citizenship, saying if they're lawful permanent residents, their kids can get birthright citizenship. So Sauer tried to pretend that that's what the 14th Amendment actually meant. It meant if you're a lawful permanent resident, your kids...
Opposed to the worst of the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Even though the 14th Amendment never used the word domicile, he just decided, no, it's actually all about domicile. It's really all about domicile. And Neil Gorsuch just flat out said, it's striking that if this domicile concept is so important, that didn't feature in any of the congressional debates at the time they passed the 14th Amendment. Yes, Neil, it's striking. It's a huge stretch. And Kagan also chided him for citing some fairly obscure sources as well. Neil Gorsuch at one point in time said, "You're citing Roman law." He said with disapproval. It was quite funny. But also, it's not even internally logical as an argument. And Gorsuch, he made an excellent point. Even if you take Sauer's argument, surely you would use a definition of domicile from 1868 when the 14th Amendment was written. Not the definition of domicile that Sauer wants to come up with, but when if in their heads, even though they never wrote the word domicile, they were thinking it's all about if you're domiciled.
Right.
Then what definition did they have of the word domicile in 1868? And he made an excellent point that back then there were no illegal immigration laws. So illegal immigrants, if they just turned up, the moment they turned up, they had domicile. So that means in 1868, domicile included illegal immigrants, and Trump still loses the case, even with his stupid definitions. Listen to him.
If domicile's the key linchpin to your argument, and I take it that it is, do we look at how domicile was understood in 1868, or do we look at it how it's understood today in context of the INA?
The 1868 understanding, I'm not aware of a strong difference between those.
Well, here's where I'm going with it. I'm just working within your argument for a moment. Today, you can point to laws against immigration that are much more restrictive than they were in 1860. We really didn't have laws like that we do today until maybe 1880. So if somebody showed up here in 1868 and established domicile, that was perfectly fine without respect to anything, any immigration laws. There they were. And so why wouldn't we, even if we were to apply your own test, come to the conclusion that the fact that someone might be illegal is immaterial?
I would first cite Wong Kim Ark on that point, because Wong Kim Ark says you're...
Well, I'm not sure how much you want to rely on Wong Kim Ark.
But
that's so funny at the end, because of course Wong Kim Ark says the direct opposite. I really enjoy explaining it to you before I played it, because most people wouldn't understand that when they're listening to it.
Yeah, even when I cut the clips, I had no idea.
But it's really funny when you understand what Gorsuch is saying.
Yeah.
You really slapped him down hard.
Yeah, that thank you for spoon feeding me. It was delicious.
And I'd love to do the same thing with Amy Coney Barrett, who had an even better argument. But unfortunately, the byplay takes 4 minutes, and it's really hard for me to explain. So I'm just going to explain it to you in my language. And I won't play it, but trust me, I am not doing her a disservice here. Her argument is what I'm saying. I have to explain it a lot, okay? Her argument was even more basic as a contradiction that they had in their case.
Okay.
Sauer is saying that the point of the 14th Amendment was to make the children of slaves legal citizens, right? Not illegal immigrants, just the children of slaves.
Yeah.
That's his argument. He's also saying that this magic domicile component required people to have allegiance to America before their children could be citizens, right? But for slaves who were brought to America illegally after the slave trade was banned like 50 years earlier, they wanted to get out as soon as they could. Those slaves did not want to be in America. If they had the opportunity, they would go immediately. They were being forced to stay. So did those slaves have an allegiance to America that Sauer required for their children to have citizenship? Because if not, Sauer's very definition was excluding the children of slaves that he says the 14th Amendment was written for. He had no idea how to respond to that. Like, he was all over the shop. And once again, I play it to you, but I'd have to explain why what he was saying was rubbish. But it was a kill shot. It was an absolute kill shot.
Can I ask a question that shows how much I know? Who is this guy?
Sauer is the Solicitor General. He's the guy whose job it is to represent the administration to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
They've got like one advocate, and that's him. So yeah,
it sounds like they do only have one. One to choose from.
Yeah, look, he is actually considered to be like a very good lawyer.
You know what? That's fair. He's been handed a piece of shit.
I was going to say he's been handed an absolute hospital pass.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, Sauer, try to argue against not just the most obvious constitutional amendment provision on earth, but 2 pieces of legislation and 200 years of history, where not a single person during that period agreed with this stupid argument of yours. Good luck, mate.
I revoke my snide thoughts about this man.
And he's got Trump looking over his shoulder as well at the time.
Yeah. No, poor guy. To be fair, poor guy.
Anyway, the other thing Sauer did was he talked a lot about the practicalities. We discussed this with Emma, which is weird, like I said, because usually conservatives don't do that. But Sauer's arguing that America is an outlier amongst modern nations with their birthright citizenship rules. Don't tell Canada. He basically meant Europe. Europe is not like America in that respect. And Kavanaugh, to that, said, I'm not seeing the relevance as a legal constitutional interpretive matter. It's a gentle way of saying, man, you're talking shit. And Sauer argued also that birth tourism was a big problem, to which Chief Justice Roberts said that has nothing to do with legal interpretation. And Sauer said, well, they couldn't possibly have intended that situation in 1868. So that shows we've been interpreting their amendment incorrectly all these years. And Roberts said, well, they weren't trying to protect against birth tourism, obviously, at the time. And that leads to the moment I mentioned to Emma before, which you can now hear.
Here's the facts about it that I think is striking. Media reported as early as 2015 that based on Chinese media reports, there are 500 birth tourism companies in the People's Republic of China whose business is to bring people here to give birth and return to that nation.
Having said all that, you do agree that that has no impact on the legal analysis before us?
I think it's. I quote what Justice Scalia said in his Hamdan dissent, where their interpretation has these implications that could not possibly have been approved by the 19th century framers of this amendment. I think that shows that they've made a mess. Their interpretation has made a mess of the provision.
Well, it certainly wasn't a problem in the 19th century.
No, but of course, we're in a new world now, as Justice Alito pointed out, where 8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
The implication was clear. Roberts is not on their side. So I would say, at the very least, the three Liberals, Barrett, Gorsuch and Roberts, are all voting against the government. Okay, so there's 6 votes to 3, at least, against them. Kavanaugh didn't seem terribly impressed either, I reckon. So I think it's 7-2, and that'd be my prediction. Might be 8-1. Thomas is confusing, but I doubt it'll be unanimous, like Emma said, suggested. But yeah, they're going to win. They said, or rather, Trump's going to lose. And there is one question though, and this is a live question: is it going to be a constitutional interpretation or a statutory interpretation? What I mean by that is under those 2 statutes I talked about that were written in 940 and 952, under those statutes, this is the language they use, any person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen of the United States. Okay, so that's basically just word for word the 14th Amendment, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the language they understood that to mean would have been taken from Wong versus Wong Kim Ark, because that's also the language from Wong Kim Ark, which was a famous Supreme Court case at the time. It's not an obscure case. So what did they mean by this wording they used from that? Well, presumably they meant what the wording meant in Wong Kim Ark. And according to Loper Bright from 2024, the case, every statute's meaning is fixed at the time of enactment. The meaning doesn't change 50 years later. So if they thought it meant the meaning of Wong Kim Ark, then that's what it means. So the Supreme Court could rule that this is against the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, or they could rule that this is against the statutes. It's equally illegal if it breaks a statute or if it breaks the constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. But what they choose to say matters.
Sure.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because if they're saying this is against the 14th Amendment, that's it. That's the end of the road. They're done. Mm-hmm. If they say this is against those statutes, then there's nothing stopping Congress passing a new statute, which does allow birthright citizenship to be banned.
Okay, that is big. Yeah,
and so that would give them an opening for Trump to pressure Congress to try and pass it. Now, they're not going to pass it. No chance. But it would just mean they can revisit this issue in 10 years or 15 years with who knows where they're going to be as far as immigration goes then. They could be so much more extreme and so much more further down the road. And so that door would be reopened for some future administration.
Sure.
So for people who want this to go away, they want the Supreme Court to rule that this is against the 14th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Kavanaugh was talking a little bit about the statute, and that's why I bring it up. If Kavanaugh can convince the other justices to make this just about the statute, to make as narrow a ruling as possible, then that does leave the door open for the future. So I just want to flag that.
Cool. No. Do you have a hunch about which way?
I think they're going to go 14th Amendment. I think there's contempt for this in the Supreme Court. So I think they're just going to slam it. But we'll see. I just want to leave that open. Because if they do go statute, I'm definitely going to back over this. And, so anyway, that's enough. I have about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to use it.
Oh. Okay.
I may be able to squeeze in a correspondence or two, but this is one I want to focus on for most of this time.
Okay.
Because the reason why is because this is relevant to the Department of Justice being shit under Pam Bondi. You want another example of how awful Pam Bondi was? Let me give it to you. Now, I told you last year about Michael Flynn's proposed settlement with the Department of Justice. To remind you, Michael Flynn claimed he was a mate of Donald Trump's, who was very, very briefly the National Security Advisor at the beginning of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. He was National Security Advisor for about 2 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, 2 to 3 weeks before he resigned because of a controversy where during the transition period he'd been having secret phone calls with, I think, the Russian foreign minister or something, which he lied about to the FBI. And the FBI were like, what? Why is he? Because I remember at the time it was all Russia. Go, why is he lying about talking to the FBI? Especially given he must know that we record those phone calls. When people are talking to the Russian foreign minister, we're listening to you. Why are you lying to us? Anyway, he claimed he was unjustly prosecuted by Robert Mueller in 2017 for knowingly and willfully making materially false statements to the FBI about those conversations with Russian diplomats. And one of the many problems he had making that case, that he was that he was unjustly prosecuted, was that he pled guilty. He pled guilty. So that's pretty justly prosecuted if the guy pleads guilty. So it's hard to argue.
This is the Binance guy all over again.
It is. Oh, wait. So it's hard to argue prosecution's unjust in this case, but yeah, whatever. The second problem he had trying to settle this case was the lawsuit about this unjust prosecution had already had one go round. Mm-hmm. He already tried this lawsuit and it was thrown out of court in 2024. The reason it was thrown out of court was, he originally sued $50 million for malicious prosecution. But the reason it was thrown out of court was to make that case, he needs to show there was an absence of probable cause for the charges. He pled guilty. That's plenty of probable cause. He pled guilty. Secondly, he needed for the prosecution to have ended with a judgment in his favour. It explicitly says that in the legislation.
Sure.
But there was no judgment in the original case at all because Trump came over the top and pardoned him halfway through the prosecution. So he didn't get close to making his case in the original lawsuit, and the court dismissed it out of hand. So he just sat back and didn't do anything until Trump won the election. And then he decided to have another go. I wonder why. When the Department of Justice has been run by someone else, maybe. So then he had another go at the lawsuit, and they suddenly decided they had to negotiate a settlement with him because his case was so magnificent. This mate of Trump's had such a strong case, they had to negotiate the settlement. Basically, Trump found a way to reward his supporters by throwing free taxpayers' money at them, by conceding to fault where there was no fault, and then paying them off. It's just a way of giving your mates free money.
Gee.
Now, we don't know what the final settlement amount was, but we believe it was $1.2 million, which is a fair chunk of change just for being Trump's friend. Flynn said, "Today, after 10 years of fighting, I've reached a settlement agreement with the United States government in my case regarding the Russian hoax FBI lawfare against me. Nothing can fully compensate for the hell that my family and I have endured over these many years. The relentless attacks, the destruction of reputations, the financial ruin, and the profound personal toll inflicted upon us all. No amount of money or formal resolution can erase the pain caused by a prosecution that should never have been brought." The Department of Justice said, "The DOJ will continue to pursue accountability at all levels for this wrongdoing. Such weaponization of the federal government must never be allowed to happen again." Spare me. The only thing worse than this is going to be when Trump pulls the same bloody trick, inevitably, over his own court cases against the Department of Justice. Remember that he's prosecuted so many times back in 2024, which he'll never forget. And he'll go, oh, it put me through hell. And he's going to, you watch, he's going to settle with his own Department of Justice. And let me tell you, when they pay him off, it's going to be a lot more than $1.2 million.
I was going to say, what was the number he was suing for the Harris interview? Was it 20 billion?
Yes, I believe it was 20 billion. That's right. Yes. It's going to be a big number. It's not going to be 20 billion, but it's going to be a lot more than 1.2 million. That much you can be sure of. And Lockie, this level of shamelessness is not normal.
Not normal.
Okay. Look, I got 3 minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're 5 minutes. Sure, why not? Okay, sleep correspondence. Tony says, Chaz, giving Trump shit for falling asleep. Hilarious. Slightly hypocritical. A couple of weeks ago, you nearly fell off your seat, mate. That is a perfect comment.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's perfect. You, Tony, have identified perfect and hilarious hypocrisy on my behalf. Thank you. No comments. Beautiful. Afroman correspondence. We talked a bit about how the cops may or may not have been responsible for the shitty warrant they were executing, and maybe we shouldn't be automatically cheering for them to be made laughing stocks. Maybe it's not their fault. Maybe someone else was responsible for the warrant, and they were just the fall guys. Thomas says, the warrant was issued because of some lady that got caught with 2 kilos of weed who told them a story about how she'd been buying it from Afroman for 8 years. And then she told a story about girls being held in the basement. They could have at least done so much research to find out there was no basement. Plus, she had a reason to lie and her stories were not consistent. It was definitely on the sheriff's department. Okay, so that's one take.
Sure.
Another take from Dev Mack. He's had the Afroman experience himself, not being rapped about, but having a raid on his house. And he's not feeling very forgiving, is Dev Mack. As someone who's had their house raided on flimsy grounds myself, it seems obvious to me the law enforcement are incentivized entirely on finding reasons for action, finding further evidence of guilt, that is, whilst conversely having exactly zero incentive to find reasons against action. Counter evidence. As such, my house gets raided by 7 police officers who didn't even know to expect school-aged children to be sleeping in their bedrooms at 6:15 a.m. As such, I have precious little sympathy for police officers conducting an unsuccessful raid on a loose premise. They're party to a system with broken incentives, and it's their responsibility to protect innocent citizens. Performing a raid under essentially false pretenses is literally the opposite of what a police force exists to do. Go Afroman. Lazy, overly authoritarian law enforcement officers deserve the humiliation. So, not very forgiving, like I said. But, the thing is, I feel awkward with this kind of stuff because, I'm so biased. Libertarians are the last people you should ask about the police. The absolute last people. I know, I confess my bias, right? So that's why I love when we can hear the other side of the coin from peppers. Like, for instance, everyone's favourite police pepper, Handel, who's got the police point of view for us right here. They write, as a former police officer, my experience is that officers are very often tasked to assist with the execution of a search warrant despite having no other involvement in the investigation. Depending on the time available, they may only be given a very limited briefing about it. That said, some of the issues Afroman has with the conduct of the officers, not the grounding of the search itself, seem reasonable to me. Okay, so it's quite balanced, especially with regard to the damage caused, though perhaps not looking longingly at a pound cake. Fair point. Regardless, police need to have thick skin, and if you rise to every insult, you won't last a day. With regard to the grounding of the warrant, in my experience, taking a search warrant on the strength of one informant would normally only be done with a strong history of reliable information from that informant. However, Even well-grounded search warrants for drug offences often result in no charges being laid simply because drugs are consumable, and you may have simply executed the search at the wrong time. You can't normally charge someone without the drugs themselves. The one thing I do find a little fishy about the search warrant, though, is that it is also said to be related to a kidnapping offence. For this type of offence, even if you don't find the evidence you're looking for, presumably you'll still have to conduct an investigation. If you're looking for the kidnapped person, then you still need to find them or otherwise confirm they weren't kidnapped. If it's only evidence of the kidnapping you're after, then presumably you have a victim. Either way, you would normally be interviewing the suspect or occupier about it. To me, as he's saying before the raid, to me, this looks like maybe the warrant came about because someone made some vague claim about him doing drugs and holding someone against their will. And when they went in and when they didn't find drugs or a kidnapping victim, they lost interest because they never really believed the kidnapping part to begin with. And that does accord with what Thomas said at the beginning as well. So look, I love the nuance of that response. Like there's plenty of wax on both sides. I really enjoyed that. And it all sounded logical to me and reasonable. So thank you very much for that handle. I love your work handle, by the way. Every time I talk about the cops, I cross my fingers you're going to have something to say about it because it's always good. So look, that'll probably do, I reckon, Lockie. I think we've done enough. We're going to have a Correspondence Extra next week anyway to talk about this week's correspondences. So I'll throw the rest in there. But do you have anything to add about anything we've said today before we move on?
My favourite part of the Artemis story and everything that's going on there was when one of the astronauts had to file a complaint to NASA because they have two versions of Microsoft Outlook on their computer and neither were working. I love that even in space, there's still going to be issues with Microsoft Outlook.
This spaceship was built by the ABC. Let me tell you. Anyway, it was funny.
Great space. Good times.
Thank you very much, Lockie. I'll see you next week. And till then, stay peppy!